Let me know when you're ready.
We are ready, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, it's 8:30 and we'll go ahead. You don't need to take a roll call again, do you?
Is Senator Brightman still excused?
Yes,
Okay, then we are good.
okay. Okay. First item of business, we're going to talk about the K-3 reading assessment and intervention. First up, preparing new teachers. The Dean of the School of Education, Dr. Jenna Shim, and a dean, the Cynthia Block from the university. Is that right? Okay, come forward and talk to us. Let me give you one word of warning. The majority of this committee is not professional educators. And we're going to have a little trouble with jargon and acronyms. And you say something like phonological awareness, and we're not quite sure what something like that means. So bear with some of us. So come forward, introduce yourselves for the record, and proceed.
Chairman Scott, with your permission, I would like to invite my colleagues, Dr. Leslie Rush and Kim Gustafson. Leslie Rush is the Excellence Chair in Literacy Education. Kim Gustafson is Executive Director of Literacy Research Center and Clinic. I would like to invite them to present with us. Sure. I'll start with myself, Chairman Scott, and members of the committee. My name is Jenna Shim, and I'm the John P. Jack Albogan, Dean of the College of Education at UW.
And my name is Cindy Brock, and I'm one of your Wyoming Literacy Excellence Chairs.
Kim Gustafson, Executive Director of the Literacy Research Center and Clinic.
Good morning. My name is Leslie Rush. I'm the other Wyoming Excellence Chair in Literacy Education.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and members of the committee. We really appreciate this opportunity to share updates on how College of Education is preparing future teachers with the skills and knowledge necessary to teach K-3 reading effectively. Although I'm new to this position, I have been part of UW for the past 15 years, and I'm deeply committed to our college, university, and our state. I'm dedicated to continuing my best effort to serve Wyoming and our citizens through educational excellence and opportunities, which is the responsibility and commitment of the land-grant university that we as the College of Education wholeheartedly embrace. This commitment is evident in the statewide outreach work which our literacy faculty and Literacy Research Center and Clinic are engaged in. In just the past 2 years, we have provided professional development services to over 14 school districts across Wyoming, and our plan continues. Back in 2016, as part of our national accreditation process, we solicited feedback from various external stakeholders on the quality of our teacher education program. During this process, we have reached out to our graduates who are teachers in Wyoming and their school district employers who can be principals and superintendents. Through this extensive feedback, we realized that our elementary education needed more literacy content. Taking this feedback very seriously, in 2017 and 18, we significantly revised the curricula for our elementary education program, incorporating not only just voices of Wyoming citizens and educators, but also extensive current research in literacy. My colleagues will provide more details about the new literacy curricula shortly. But for now, I would like to share that our updated program ensures that students are well prepared to meet Wyoming Statute 21-3-401 on reading assessment and intervention. The required courses are aligned with the key literacy topics, including phonological awareness that Chairman Scott has just mentioned, that helps students and children with decoding, also phonics, decoding words and non-words, oral reading fluency, and reading comprehension. Again, my colleagues will be happy to explain each of those key components more in detail. Our students are exposed to these topics through 4 different courses, which also cover essential instruction and assessment in oral language, vocabulary, and writing, all contributing to literacy and reading. In these courses, we also highlight that children follow various paths and use different strategies, reflecting the variety in their development stages, cognitive abilities, and learning environments. We all understand that not all children learn the same way, so we have to tailor our instruction to cater to differences in individuals. Since 2019, all students entering the BA in elementary education and BA in elementary and special education programs are required to complete these comprehensive literacy courses. This rigorous and thoughtfully designed curriculum ensures that future teachers are exceptionally prepared to foster K-3 students' literacy development in laying the groundwork for their lifelong learning and success. We also ensure that our students recognize that fostering early literacy success depends on the support from the qualified teachers, but also from students' parents, school administrators, district support, and wider community support. I now turn to my colleagues for more detailed updates on our literacy curricula and how we revised our curricula to support success of early reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Shim. So I just wanted to take a minute or two and share about my role as one of the 2 Wyoming Excellence Chairs. And so I'm paid by the citizens of the state to provide information and about literacy-based research and so forth to children, teachers, administrators, policymakers, our colleagues in the Wyoming Department of Ed. And it's an incredible privilege to have this position. So I thank the citizens for having these 2 positions. I also now want to kind of turn your attention to one of your handouts. And it's the handout that says University of Wyoming College of Education. It's to the members of the Joint Education Interim Committee. Do you have that handout available? Yes, it's the one. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's the one that has that table on it. And if you can look at the column to the left where it says literacy topic, those are the literacy topics that are required in the Wyoming's K-3 literacy legislation. And so you can look across those 5 topics and see what it is that the legislate that you have asked that we make sure that we address in our literacy coursework. Then, if you look at the column to the right, the column to the right where it says required UWBA courses, the undergrad courses that are required, those are the courses and the levels of the courses where we address those 5 areas. So I hope what you can see is that we've taken your input very seriously and made sure that every one of these literacy courses address what you've asked us to address. Now, in addition, and I know Dean Shim mentioned this, in addition, in these courses, we also cover additional areas like oral language, writing, vocabulary, areas that we know are very, very important for children's success. So, sorry.
I do want to interrupt you and say that, again, we're not experts, and if we got something wrong in that language and these aren't the right 4 categories, or they're constraining you in some way, let us know.
Thank you. And I'd like to say that one of the things that we in the Literacy Research Center and Clinic value is the opportunity to collaborate, to serve our kids and our teachers and our schools and our district. So thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead now and, the other course I forgot to mention is we also require a children's literature course because children's literature is crucial for the elementary instruction. Now, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Leslie Rush, who's the other Literacy Endowed Chair.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the committee. Nice to see all of you again. As I said previously, my name is Leslie Rush, and I'm the second of the two Wyoming Excellence Chairs. My area of expertise is in adolescent literacy, which is like middle school and high school students. So I also, though, have a K-12 reading endorsement and have spent a lot of time thinking about elementary education. So as a former administrator in the College of Ed, I'm just going to walk you through the 4 courses that are on that table to give you a sense of kind of what they do. I promise I am not going to use a lot of jargon and I'm not going to make it bad. I just want to help you understand kind of how we've arranged the coursework around literacy. And of course, literacy is not the only topic that we're preparing teachers to teach. It's just one of them. So as you can see from the table in the document that we provided, the required literacy courses are designed to extend across the 4 years in the bachelor's degree program. And this is both programs in our elementary ed bachelor's degree and also our combined elementary and special education bachelor's degree. Okay. The initial course, EDEL 2140, that's the first one on that list, is a foundational course designed to provide entry-level knowledge on the literacy topics that Dr. Shim and Dr. Brock have already described. Typically, students take this course as freshmen, sometimes sophomores. If they're a transfer student, they may take it as a junior, but most of the students in that course are freshmen or sophomores. Students also take, at this point in their career, a course on children's literature. That's at the sophomore level, which introduces them to a wide range of texts and provides support on how to use those texts in classrooms. The title of the course is Children's Literature, but it includes both fictional and non-fictional texts, so it's not only fiction, okay? At the junior level, students take a course in literacy difficulties, which helps them gain an understanding of how children might experience reading and writing difficulties because of disabilities like dyslexia or because of other issues that may impact their ability to learn to read and write. And then how teachers can provide intervention to support children who may be struggling. So that literacy difficulties course is positioned at the junior level. The 2 courses that students take their senior year, just before they go out to student teaching, are 2 intensive teaching methods courses in literacy that are differentiated by age, with one course focused on early and emergent literacy instructional methods. So that would be sort of kindergarten through 2nd grade. And then a second course that's focused on literacy instructional practices relevant for upper elementary age children, so 3rd through 6th grade. In addition to these 2 senior level literacy methods courses, and of course at the same time they're taking methods courses in other subject areas, science, math, social studies, art, all of those other kinds of courses as well. Students engage in a 3-week practicum experience in the student teaching classroom that they will later on do their student teaching experience in. So they're starting early during their methods semester. They get 3 weeks out of UW, they go to their student teaching classroom, and that's where they are engaged in starting to think about applying this information that they've learned to children in that classroom, getting to know the children, getting to know the mentor teacher, that kind of thing. And then after they've completed their UW-based coursework, the next step for them is the full semester of student teaching when we ask them to be in the classroom, the same requirements as that classroom teacher. So they're there early in the morning until late in the afternoon. And that's their opportunity to be supported by an excellent qualified mentor teacher in applying the knowledge that they've gained through their university courses and adapting that knowledge to the school districts and that classroom's literacy curriculum, literacy practices. So that's a brief rundown of those courses. Of course, none of us here teach all of those courses. I think Dr. Gustafson and I have taught the very initial course. So we could talk about that if you have questions about it. But it's a programmatic thing with all of the literacy faculty joining in to prepare our students in literacy. Now, I will just add one more point that I want to reiterate, which Dr. Shim mentioned. When we revised the elementary ed bachelor's degree program and then also developed the new elementary and special ed degree program, this was in 2017, 2018, what we did in response to the feedback that we got about literacy coursework and the need to have more literacy preparation for our students was we took what was essentially a literacy minor, which was taken by a good number of students, but certainly not all because they're not required to take a minor. We took all of the courses from that minor, embedded them in the bachelor's degree program and made them required. So that was one of the key things that we did. And then we made some revisions to those courses along the way as well. So the focus on providing additional literacy preparation was, as previously mentioned, one strong recommendation from feedback on program strengths and weaknesses from those most knowledgeable about our programs, namely our graduates and the schools and districts that employed them. So that brings our presentation to an end. We stand really happy and prepared to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, questions? Senator Office.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for, this presentation. I think this really addresses a lot of what we've been looking to hear and understand better. I was curious how many cohorts then graduating classes have graduated with this full program. I'm guessing it's around 2 or 3, but where are we at in terms of producing teachers that have fully engaged in this after the redesign and after the integration of the requirements to the legislation?
So as the administrator who was in charge when we developed those programs, I can tell you that our first full cohort of students graduated in spring of 23. So we, as they come into the university, they're under the catalog that they come in under. And so when we made the catalog change, we couldn't require the previous students to take those courses, but we can require the ones who started in fall of 19. So spring of 23 was our first cohort. We did have some graduating in between there who were transfer students or something like that who took all of the courses, but spring 23 would be really the first full group of students.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just kind of curious, something that Chairman Northrup and I worked on pretty hard 5 or 6 years ago was also the 2x2 initiative. And so I'm curious, as we're looking at certainly the sophomore and junior level information, what does this look like with the community colleges, and what type of cohesion has happened with the community colleges to ensure that if they're not starting their process at the University of Wyoming, but they're coming in from Northwest or from Central Wyoming, that they're prepared to walk onto campus to get that bachelor's, and they're not going to be hit with this long list of credentials that they've got to get in order to graduate. What type of discussion has happened with the community college?
Thank you, Representative Brown, for that question. I'm getting this one to answer as well. I'm no longer in charge of the advising process, but I can tell you how it typically works when we make changes. We have annual, sometimes twice a year meetings between the College of Education and the advisors in the community colleges in a transition sort of meeting. And so I feel confident that in that meeting, the conversation about these coursework has been had. I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, we would need to go and look at more accurate data to give you a more concrete answer to that question.
Chairman Scott and Representative Bro, thank you for that question. We have been having recent discussions with Wyoming Community College Commissioner, Executive Director, and also their Chief of Academic Officer with our team about better synchronizing our advising system so that University of Wyoming advisors can look at students in community colleges and what they're taking so that we could better coordinate our effort in streamlining that educational journey for our students, if and when they decide to come to University of Wyoming. Now, we will talk more about this and share more details later on today in CTE program updates. And we're starting and we're piloting with CTE program. And if it is successful, we are hoping that we could expand our efforts with all programs. Thank you.
Representative Overby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the legislature, the information about education comes to us somewhat anecdotally. And so one of the words that is poured into our heads is dyslexia and the need for early identification of that. I was wondering if you could address how that term kind of fits into the broader issues of reading difficulties and what your coursework does about dyslexia specifically.
I'm just going to let you know about what we're doing in the LRCC with regards to dyslexia, and then my colleagues will talk about the coursework. Last year, we had a generous donation for working specifically on dyslexia. And so we created with scholars in the field, because I am not a dyslexia expert. So my job is to find experts. And so we collaborated with scholars in the field, and they created 4 modules, pretty comprehensive modules that are on WyoLearn, which is a free platform that anybody can access, created for teachers and administrators and anybody interested in finding out more about dyslexia. We've recently received another donation specifically for dyslexia. And right now we're working on thinking about the best ways to utilize that donation in order to help teachers and students in areas of dyslexia.
Let me ask a follow-up question. My impression is that the term dyslexia is being used rather loosely for any reading difficulty. And I don't know what extent there really is a scientific definition of dyslexia the way you would a normal disease that would inform the treatment, or whether it is just generally being used to describe any kind of reading difficulty. Could you all elaborate on that?
Thank you, Chairman Scott. And I'll try to answer both questions about the coursework and your question about dyslexia. So I think, to be brief, where in particular in our literacy coursework, the issue of dyslexia is addressed is in that reading difficulties course. I don't remember the course number off the top of my head, but it's in the chart. What course number is it? EDEL 3720. So that's a course focusing on the kinds of struggles that students may have, dyslexia certainly being one of them, and working with pre-service teachers to sort of recognize how they might address the issues of students with dyslexia or students who come to school with limited oral language vocabulary. There's lots of reasons that kids would struggle, dyslexia certainly being one of them. Now, to answer your question, Senator Scott, I would say that dyslexia is a very contested term, so lots of people have opinions about it. For sure, there are children who struggle, and so that's kind of where it's one disability. And I think because it's a contested term, sometimes the term gets misapplied more broadly, perhaps, than it should. But again, that's not my area of expertise, so I don't want to go off too much on that. I would just say that, we're doing what we can to help students be aware of that in collaboration with our colleagues in our special education program, because it really is an issue about disabilities and how we meet the needs of kids with disabilities.
Okay, proceed.
Sorry, real quick, Mr. Chairman, Representative Clouston has a question.
Oh, okay. Hold a minute. Go ahead, Representative Boston, and also remind, because I don't see it when it's on me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel for being here. How does the university work with our school districts? As you guys get some of this newer information and we're making some changes, how do you put that out to our school districts so we can help work with our teachers that are already out there teaching?
Who wants to handle that one?
I will. Thank you for the question. So in the last couple of years, I've served as the interim director of the LRCC, the Literacy Research Center and Clinic. And our job is to go out into the state, into the districts and work with them at a really great cost because we're fortunately an endowed center. So we're able to provide professional development and needs assessments to districts around the state at a reasonable price. Basically, some Taco John's and a hotel and our travel. That's kind of our cost plus. And so in the 2 years that I've served as interim, we've been, as Dr. Shim had mentioned, to several districts. We have been everywhere from Lyman, Wyoming, to Basin, Wyoming, to Buffalo, Wyoming, doing needs assessments at their request. And so what a needs assessment looks like, if you're interested, is we go in, we observe in the classrooms, we have a template that we look at that covers all of these things, plus that we've been talking about. And then we write up a very comprehensive report, and we let the school districts know areas of strengths and areas that we see that maybe they could work on to better meet the needs of the students. Then we leave it up to the school districts if they would like to continue on with professional development with us. They can also use other entities for professional development or not at all. Most of them do choose to work with us, to continue working with us. And so in the last 2 years, we've been working with 2 schools in Fremont, Fremont 38 and Fremont 6. Also in I'm Bighorn 1, and Pinedale Sublet. Yes, sorry.
When you give us a district, give us the town too, because
Okay, yeah.
we're somewhat familiar with the district numbers, but not perfect.
Yeah, so Pinedale, Burlington, Cowley, and then the schools of Wind River and Arapahoe are the 4 that we have been working with over the past 2 years for professional development, and then many others for needs assessments, and then 2 Cheyenne and a school in Cheyenne and in Jackson Hole. We've been serving in a consultant way. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question. I can get more into detail. Yep, sure.
Chairman Scott,
Okay.
may I continue? Just
Sure.
thank you for that question. And another concrete example is the person who is in charge of the Elementary Principals Association said, look, we need to know what are the best practices in literacy in each of these major areas of literacy. So one of the things that the LRCC did is we went to, as Dr. Gustafson has mentioned,
LRCC.
Literacy Research Center and Clinic. Sorry, I'm going to stop. I'll stop doing those. We went to the top literacy scholars in each one of these areas. Like who is the top scholar in comprehension? Who's the top scholar in fluency? Now, there's more than one, but there are some that most people will say, everybody knows these are top scholars. And we asked them to help us create modules, and these modules are free for Wyoming principals and Wyoming teachers. And if they want to know what are current best practices in these areas, these are places that they can go to through the Literacy Research Center and Clinic for free.
Okay, Representative.
I just want to say thank you for the answer, and those are the answers I was hoping for.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if you could maybe touch on the lab school. I'm not sure how familiar my colleagues are with kind of the on-training program that happens here on campus, and what that can look like as we bring students that we're trying to make sure that we're producing jobs here in the state of Wyoming to enter our teaching profession.
Chairman Scott, and thank you for that question, Representative Provenza. One thing that I would like to clarify, and that has been in discussion and as a question and maybe even confusion, is that lab school belongs to University of Wyoming, and also we oversee College of Education. However, the fact is that lab school belonging isn't the right word, but lab school is part of Albany County School District number 1. So historically, we have worked very closely with lab school, placing our student teachers in lab school, and we still continue our collaboration. After COVID, and because of the national landscape of the education and access to public schools, we do not have as much access or free access to lab school. There are a lot of security means that are placed so that our students can't freely go in and out of lab school. And again, that is the national trend in terms of access to public schools because of what's happening in our country recently. And so, but we continue to work with lab school as well as all schools in Albany County School District.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the intervention with the districts that Representative Clausen mentioned, and just clarify that you go into a district at the district's request. So if they don't ask, that you don't go. Is that correct? And I have a follow-up.
That is correct. We try and make ourselves available. So we have a literacy conference, and we make it known that we're available. And we have, we're on social media and places, and we have our own, website. And so they can contact us that way. But yeah, we don't force ourselves on them.
Thank you. That I have a follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The modules that you talked about, though, are something any teacher can access. If their district isn't interested in you coming in helping them, and a particular teacher really wants some help, or an administrator, they can access those modules themselves. Is that correct?
Yes, they can access the dyslexia modules and also the literacy leadership 1 and 2. And those are about 14 modules in all. And they can get PTSB credit for those as well.
But thank you. And just thank you guys for being here and answering our questions. It's
Okay.
really great.
Let me follow up and ask a little, what does the module amount to? Is it canned lectures? What is it? Yeah.
Can you hear? Okay. Yeah, thank you. So that's a good question. We do have, as I mentioned, we have lectures by top scholars, comprehension. What do you need to know as a teacher? What do you need to know as an administrator? We also have included a whole series of some of the very best current resources. What are some additional places you can go to learn more about this? And the way we have these set up is that these are interactive. These are run through the Literacy Research Center and Clinic. And so principals and teachers will engage in various different activities, and they're interactive with those of us at the clinic who help monitor the modules.
And
Chairman Scott and Representative Lawley, thank you for that question. I would like just also elaborate that how we developed modules in our curricula, of course, depends on extensive research in literacy, but because every context is different, that one method that may work in one context may be very different from what would work in the other context. So we have really paid attention to the voices of Wyoming and also educators and school administrators. So I think that is important for us to emphasize that we have been and we are committed to addressing the needs of Wyoming schools, and we are committed to listening to Wyoming educators and always willing to improve and continue to do what we're doing well. Thank you for this opportunity.
Chairman Scott, I also, and Representative Lally too, I also wanted to mention that this is one of my personal favorite parts of my position, is that when we work with schools, we don't walk in and say, here's what you do this, that, and the other. We walk in and we work with schools and we co-construct and we work collaboratively. And so we find, we're not experts in Pavilion. We're not experts at Arapahoe. The people who live there know their communities. So these are long-term commitments of multiple years where we work together to identify specifically what are the literacy needs that they see in their schools, and then how do we collaborate and work together across time to help build teachers' knowledge and expertise. And we work directly with children too. And so it's an incredible privilege, but it's long-term and it's very context embedded in the very different communities in our state.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. I will just add one more, and I promise I won't raise my hand anymore. Trying to do my job as a Dean of the College of Education, I recently have asked our two Wyoming Excellence Chairs in Literacy about the hours of traveling that they have spent just last year visiting schools and working with school districts. And I'm pleased to share that they spent, I just looked it up on their report, and they spent 1,032 hours just being on the road and visiting schools. So they are putting a lot of work into working with Wyoming school districts.
You know, Wyoming is a small town with long streets, and you're learning all about the long streets. Okay, over here. Yeah, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all you do for the University of Wyoming, and thank you to the University of Wyoming for all they've done for me. But our district is currently certified and gone through the process of the high reliability schools, 1, 2, 3. They're 4. Our elementaries are 4, and then our secondary schools just finished 4. We're waiting on that accreditation. So speak to us about the research-based programs that are out there for accreditation and what you do in helping with districts receive accreditation or helping them with their accreditation process, or if you even do that.
Who's going to take that one?
Chairman
ahead.
Scott and Representative Berger, that's an interesting question. As far as I know, the LRCC, the Literacy Research Center and Clinic, has not been actively involved directly in impacting school district or school accreditation. That's my take. I don't know if my colleagues have other suggestions.
I don't want to, I agree with Dr. Rush. That's my understanding too. And I don't know if this is answering the second part of your question, but I think you talked about research and resources. And so, and I can't speak to general accreditation, but I can speak to the way we work with literacy with respect to resources. So, and I'll give you a concrete example at Wind River Elementary School. They decided that they wanted to work extensively on vocabulary. Now, we all have expertise in literacy, but we don't have expertise in every area of literacy. So what we do is, depending on what areas the schools want to work in, we bring in the top scholars and they work with those schools. So for example, Linda Kuchen, who's one of who studied vocabulary for the 30 to 40 years, actually came to Wind River and Crowheart. She went to both schools, and she actually provided professional development based specifically on what they needed. So they let her know, this is where we are in our school-wide, because they have a satellite school, understanding of vocabulary. We had been working with them. We brought in resources. We've been modeling lessons, and then we bring in experts. That school then decided they wanted to work a little bit more on morphology. So we brought in one of the leading morphology scholars, and she came this year, Dinah Townsend, and she worked specifically with that school. Now, what's impressive to us is that we're trying to work with the districts to build local capacity. And they can do this work. They become the experts that then teach others. And the people, the principal and some of the teachers at Barney Laycock and some of the teachers at his school are actually coming to the Literacy Research Association conference. And they're going to meet with the researchers and they're interpreting the research in their school. We work with them collaboratively. We provide them leads and so forth. But this is what I think is powerful for our state, is when we build local capacity and the teachers and the administrators are very, very engaged in striving to do that in their own areas.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that. My follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, is then as I look at this and as I hear your testimony to us, a lot of people think that this coursework and when a student finishes the University of Wyoming, it's the end. This is just the foundation. Could you speak to us about what it means to be a lifelong learner? What it means to a teacher to be a lifelong learner in their profession, in all of their facets of life, because it's huge, because it takes a special person to be a teacher. Okay, that lifelong learner. This is just the foundation. Again, this is not the end. This coursework is not the end. Could you speak to that for us, please?
Dean?
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and thank you for that question. That's really, really important question. And the notion of lifelong learner is not only important, but it's essential. We can't stop learning, and all of us, those of us who's in the room, we are all lifelong learners. And in the College of Education, beyond our academic programs, we also have different initiatives that are meant to support Wyoming school districts and teachers so that they continue learning. So for instance, led by Dr. Colby Gall, who is our TEI Trustees Education Initiative Managing Director, we have an initiative called Wyoming Teacher Mentor Corps. And what it is that we, just as Dr. Brock just discussed, having developed local capacity, we train existing or veteran teachers to mentor those who are more novice or at early career in their teaching career so that they continue to learn. And as we know, it's one thing for us to know our knowledge, and it's yet another for us to teach it to not only our students, but to their fellow colleagues. So in that way, they are continuing to renew the sense of their purpose of why they're teaching, but also continue to learn, because when we teach others, we learn what we don't know. And until we do that, we do not know what we don't know. So through these, I just use it as for the interest of time, I just use it as Wyoming Teacher Mentor Corps as an example, but we do have several initiatives that are meant to support teachers to be lifelong learners. Thank you.
And I would add to that, that I think almost all the other professions I've seen, you have an element of this where you're getting continuing education and it renews and reinvigorates people. And I'm very glad to see our School of Education doing this and getting out and doing things in the classroom and not just sitting in Laramie and being the ivory tower.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. To add on to that, I would just, in the area of literacy in particular, the idea is that we are graduating students with a bachelor's degree who are ready to be novice teachers, right? And then through the years of experience that they get and from the training in particular curricula, they improve their work. In addition, the School of Teacher Ed and the College of Ed offers several graduate programs in literacy education that are designed for classroom teachers. I happen to coordinate a couple of those, so I'm pretty knowledgeable about them. One of them is a certificate program. It's a graduate certificate, so it's not a master's degree. It's like 21 credit hours that leads a classroom teacher to be able to get an endorsement in reading, either at the elementary, the secondary, or K-12 level from the Wyoming PTSB. So, and it's also offered through distance completely, so people don't have to come to Laramie to take it. All the courses are available by distance. Then we also have a master's degree program in literacy. If someone wants to get their master's degree along with the reading endorsement, they can combine them and get both, which is a really nice opportunity. That also is available by distance, and all of our students in both of those programs are part-time students who are current classroom teachers.
And this may be pie in the sky, but at the Literacy Research Center and Clinic, what we would love to see is we would love to see virtually all the teachers in the state of Wyoming have their literacy endorsements, have their literacy master's degrees. Because one of the things we do know from decades and decades of scholarship is that highly qualified, highly educated teachers are the best teachers to work with our kids.
Okay. I'll come to you in just a minute.
And our commitment is to not only serve our students through our academic programs, which is critically important, but continue to follow them to their job site. And that's where our initiatives come in, such as the one that I just discussed about Wyoming Teacher Mentor Corps. We're also building in collaboration with Wyoming Department of Education, Principal Academy, Leadership Academy, which all of this, when we isolate everything that we talked about without context, it is not successful. And what we have learned is that we have to work with all educators and all different entities to make sure that our students succeed.
Okay. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm rereading this, I'm looking at a few other things, and I guess my direct question to you is, this has been basically a pet or baby of mine for 4 or 5 years now that I've really dove into pretty heavily here. That would be good for a literacy conversation, right? As I'm looking at this particular piece of paper looks like it's a whole bunch of courses. And then when you sit there and you start reading it, you realize it's 4 courses. It's 1 course per year that they're in this. And that seems a little low to me. I'm not the expert by any stretch of the imagination. That's why you guys are here. As we're discussing this and as we're talking about turning out the teachers that need to be able to learn to teach the kids that are struggling and having difficulties to make sure that they're reading by 3rd grade, is 4 classes really enough?
Chairman Scott, and thank you for that question, Representative Brown. The courses that we have listed, obviously, and we wanted to make it concise, so there are 4 courses, but those courses don't stand alone in context. So just as you learn additional multiplication and students move through upper mathematic courses, they are integrated into their next level courses. The contents in these courses are all integrated throughout our remaining courses so that students and student teachers can reinforce what they have learned in these 4 courses. So again, these courses are sort of listed as arbitrary representation of what we're covering of those key domains in literacy. However, it may be useful to state that all these contents and key areas in literacy continue to be reinforced throughout their program. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up, what percentage of their total coursework are these required courses that are in this chart?
So I'm not going to be able to come up with a percentage on the fly. I'm a former high school English teacher, so you're asking a lot there. But I will say that the total number of credit hours in an undergraduate degree program is 120 to 128. And included in that, of course, is meeting the general education requirements. So there's those courses, and then these are also going to be teachers of mathematics, of science, of social studies. So they're taking content courses in all of those areas as well as art. And then they're also taking methods courses in those areas. So I don't know if these are 3 credit hours plus 1 additional course that's mentioned, which is not in the table, which is our children's literature course. So that would be 15 hours total.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I just want, thank you, Chairman Scott. I wanted to follow up with Representative Brown's question. If you could ask the literacy people at this table, we would want a lot more literacy courses. I'm just going to be honest with you. We really would. The issue is if you had math people in front of you, science people in front of you, social studies people in front of you, they're all going to argue that their content matters, and it does. It matters too. But this is why the questions that many of the folks have been asking are so crucial. When when pre-service teachers leave, they're the best beginning teachers of literacy that we have the capacity to work with. They need a lot more work, which is why the endorsement, the master's degree, working in their schools, all of this matters because they do need more. And you're right about that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that if we had mathematics teachers and English teachers, and well, you guys are English teachers, but anybody else that's interested in going down that path. But the science has proven that if you can't read by third grade, you can't do pretty much anything else. And that's why this is so foundational. And that's why I really, really press hard on this idea that 4 courses. I understand that, you know, we've got to have other courses in there. And I know that at 120 credit hours, we've got to turn out the teachers eventually. But I do start to worry that 4 courses over the course of 4 years, when it comes to literacy and especially elementary education literacy, it seems low to me. I understand what you're saying, that it's a foundation, right? And you guys build upon that. I'm just, maybe you know, there's a lot of electives that I think can be added into there and reinforced on top of this. But to me, I would think that this would be one of the core foundations for our elementary educators as they're being turned out of here with their bachelor's degree, that they know how to identify a kid that can't read and how to fix that problem.
And yeah, and I would add to that, I think in terms of looking at early literacy as being the foundation for everything else, Representative Landon is speaking for the committee as a whole. That's been one of the things we really said we've got to focus on, because if you can't read, you can't do the other things. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would just like to maybe bring us back to the point that we have the nation's top readers. So while there are 4 classes on here, there are 3 credit hours, but maybe one of them is 4. And while it could be spread over the course of their career, oftentimes seniors wait till their senior year to take senior classes, about when they're about to go out to the job market. So right now, the evidence suggests to me that this is working at least some degree. If we have such high performing students and we have the highest performing students in the country, let us not forget. So thank you for your work.
Okay, we're going to have to move on to the question.
All right, Mr. Chairman, just real quick, just you can get a master's in literacy. Let's say a new teacher went out and just filled their toolbox of just literacy. I've got a master's, heck, I even have a doctorate in literacy. Okay. Day 1, new teacher, never taught before, but has all this course curriculum. Day 1, let's even just talk about the first week. What are they going to have to do to be successful in that classroom? What is that classroom going to look like day 1? Is it right off the bat teaching literacy? What is that teacher going to have to really establish?
Chairman Scott and Representative Berger, thank you so much for that question. I think the first day of school, of course, in any content area, successful teaching is not just about content area itself. I think that we must not forget the human aspect of education, understanding our students, getting to know our students, being empathetic of our students. All of those components are the component areas that we cover in our teacher education program. If we only taught mechanics of the contents, then we would be training robots. And that it is really important to remember that we have real humans in the classrooms, and we do emphasize that in our teacher ed program.
Yeah, and they do get a lot of classroom experience, do they not?
Absolutely.
You got to follow up? Guess not. Okay. Anything else, committee? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We hope to have a continuing dialogue with the School of Education. because you prepare so many of our teachers. You're key to the success of our overall K-12 program. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity again.
State Department of Education, you had a few words to say briefly.
Good morning, Chairman Scott, committee members, Shelley Hamill with Wyoming Department of Education, Chief Academic Officer. I appreciate the comments and the committee's continued interest in literacy and the invitation both to myself and to the University of Wyoming to present. I know I was taking notes and appreciated their presentation. I will be here then to provide an update that you requested about the implementation of Wyoming Statute 213401 requirements, and then some additional other literacy improvement efforts that we're supporting at the WDE. I'll also take a few minutes to review some recommended policy changes from Superintendent Dagenfelder's Strategic Plan Literacy Cabinet. So as we are all aware, the most recent changes to Wyoming Statute 213401, sections D and E, required several actions on the part of the WD and school districts. These include for the WDE, the promulgation of rules. These rules were to address criteria for the selection of universal screeners and then to identify the use of those screeners, as well as defining professional development requirements. Some of the changes in the statute went on to identify the need for professional development and evidence-based literacy instruction and intervention and professional development in identifying the signs of reading difficulties, including but not limited to, and here's that word, dyslexia, and other reading deficiencies. Another action item was that the statutory language also required the WDE through the superintendent's authority to review and approve district materials that were related to the K-3 educator professional development requirements. So I'm pleased to say that the agency chapter 56 rules went into effect on November 3rd of 2023. The rules included stakeholder developed criteria for the identification of appropriate screening instruments and identifying then what skills should be screened for at each of the screening periods, which we know are 3 times a year at all grades, kindergarten through 3rd. Additionally, the rules included then criteria for defining the amount and the parameters for the content for the required professional development for all kindergarten through 3rd grade educators as required by statute. The professional development requirements are tailored then to the educator's role. I want to point that out. And then you might recall that detailed information about both the screening and the professional development criteria and guidance materials were provided throughout the 2023 interim. And all meetings, I think I presented at every single one, and currently available on the WDE website if you no longer have those hard copies. The required professional development plans from districts have been received and reviewed. This was our first cycle for those. Districts have been notified of their plan approval status, and they were either approved with recommendations, or provided with provisional approval. The WD has also sought to support districts with robust professional development opportunities. I would just tack that on to everything that you just heard that's available for districts and educators through the University of Wyoming. The WD is also seeking to support those in-service educators. And we work to make these available both in person and virtually and asynchronous as well for flexibility. So most of these opportunities that we've been putting into place have been funded with State Reserve ESSER or other federal funds. Over the last 4 years, there have been many other literacy initiatives then that are not related to directly or required directly by the statute, but rather support the work of the statute. So just to mention a few, this year, we're going to see the end of the collaborative initiative between what is called the Federal Comprehensive Network Center. The federal government rolls out these support network regions and divide the country into areas, and we're part of Region 11. So I'll just refer to that as Region 11. We've collaborated with them with the University of Wyoming's Literacy Research Center and Clinic, which you just heard about, and 2 elementary schools, the Arapahoe Elementary and the Wind River Elementary. Both of those, of course, are in Fremont County, and I think you just heard extensive testimony about those 2 projects. The only thing that I would really add to that is just my gratitude for the intentionality of that project. Both the teams at Region 11 and the LRCC teams were really intentional about strengthening Fremont educators' knowledge and skill set, and not just stopping at that knowledge base, but moving to the transfer of that knowledge and those skills into the classroom and in work with students, and then the corresponding development of students' development. They mentioned that each school selected their own interest area, so vocabulary and writing. And I want to just really do a shout out to that team. They took this last year because like I said, we'll wrap up in September, it'll end, to make sure this past year has really been focused on sustainability. How will those practices and that knowledge continue to be shared with other educators in their districts and sustained as new teachers come on board? So really appreciate that. The WD in the Region 11 also rewrote the Reading Assessment and Intervention Guidance Framework document, which you were provided a copy of last year. And I just want to point out that this was completed with extensive input from national and state experts. And that also can be accessed on the WD website. Much like the university, we don't contain all of the knowledge base or the expertise that we would need for every single area in literacy at the WDE. So we also reach out to those national scholars and experts to be able to ensure that we have the most up-to-date and most quality materials to support our districts with. Using the ESSER State Reserve Funds, the WD also sponsored a statewide opportunity for educators to participate in LETTERS. That is an acronym that stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. This professional development opportunity was made available to early childhood educators, our K-12 educators, and administrators. There are 3 different specific programs that they can choose. So early childhood LETTERS, LETTERS 3rd edition, which is targeted at K-12 educators, and then LETTERS for administrators. I'm pleased to say that that professional development program aligns very closely with our statute and addresses those components that are called out in the statute. We also established just a sustainability partnership with school districts to ensure that the LETTERS participants, that some of them that met the requirements through the LETTERS program were trained as facilitators to be able to conduct ongoing training within their districts or to be hired by other districts to ensure that this continues. By having a trained facilitator in the district, it really reduces the cost for districts if they choose to continue to roll that out to educators that were for some reason unable to participate in the state opportunity or maybe join the district later. So we're pleased with that. We offered 75 spots for facilitators. And then in October, the WDE will begin the final year of a 5-year, $43 million comprehensive literacy state development grant. 25 school districts have participated in that for the last 4 years, and they'll be wrapping up their work with that. This grant, it was unique in that it identified that funds be used to specifically address practices at both the early childhood preschool space, the elementary and the secondary levels, and that it all be aligned to structured literacy. and most up-to-date and current research. With the CLSD funding, the WDE was also able to provide professional development to those participating districts, so those subgrantees. But then also we have used those funds to provide the Embracing Literacy Conference annually for the past 3 years, and that's available to all educators in the state. Some of the additional professional development events that were made available to subgrantees over the past 3 years include not only the Embracing Literacy Conference that's hosted in the summer, but also Embracing Literacy all year long, which are monthly webinars. We offered what's called Spotlight on Dyslexia, which was a semester-long training series. We offered several community of practices, one that recently utilized the Writing Revolution text as a book study, and then one that was a Literacy Leaders Coaching Conference. Both of those lasted an entire school year. And then this summer, next week, we kick off the 5th annual Embracing Literacy Conference. Pleased to share that the University of Wyoming will be presenting there as well. They were there last year and the year before, and we're thrilled with that. And I would encourage you to join if you can. If anyone is interested in having that registration, we would be thrilled to provide it to you. To wrap up about the ongoing efforts, I just want to share that this summer we will finalize 2 projects. Well, this year we will. Later this summer, in August, we're going to release what is called a Dyslexia Handbook. And at the end of the year, by December, we have been working with AIR to provide also some foundational modules that any educator in the state will be able to access that address. There will be 10 of them, and they address the foundational skills that are required in the statute and go just a little bit beyond. We wanted to ensure that vocabulary and writing were also addressed. So both of these, I just want to point out also that both of these projects have been funded with federal dollars. So I'm going to just take a minute now and conclude my remarks with going over those policy recommendations. I think that you have a copy of those as attachment A to the memo that I provided. So we'll just dive in unless there are any questions about my previous remarks.
I'm going to interrupt you, and what we'll do, we'll finish up and ask questions, but then we'll have a public comment period. How many people here are going to want to comment on this particular topic? Are we going to have any? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't see any questions, so we'll go ahead and dive into the policy recommendations. So these recommendations come courtesy of the superintendent's strategic plan literacy cabinet. All right, and I'll start with in section 1A. Right off the bat, when you're looking at the statute, it talks about each school district shall select and implement a reading assessment and intervention, and the word that's currently in statute says program. They recommend changing that word program in that context throughout the statute to system. And then also to go on, that uses instruments instead of an instrument. And it goes on to say identified by the state superintendent that screens for signs of reading difficulties included but not limited to yada yada. So I think I'll just share that the reason that they would like to see the word change from program to systems is that there's been a lot of confusion caused by that word. So often people will read that statute and they'll read that sentence and they think that the word program there means a commercially available off the shelf, program. Instead of understanding that to mean as a broader context that each district develops a literacy program or system that includes a core curriculum and that also includes various interventions and an assessment, components of assessment. And so that word program seems to be problematic for folks. The change in the word instrument to instruments is also intended to provide districts with more flexibility I think there's some idea there that when those screeners are identified, that you need to select one, that your district just chooses one. And that's just really not very practical for districts, because as students are working their way through, levels of intervention, if you have a child identified for special education, they may be using a different assessment, some different things like that. So we want to provide that flexibility is what the recommendation was. Are there any questions about that recommendation?
Seeing none. Go ahead.
Mr.
Oh,
Chairman, thank
there-
you, sorry. It's me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Representative Brown, for helping me with my internet. Does it need to say research-based program, or are we okay with just program?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Berger, later in the statute, it does reference evidence-based. So that's a requirement already in the other language in the statute.
Okay.
I mean, it would certainly be a policy decision if you wanted to tuck it in there as well, but
Anything more?
yes.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Going on then, there's a sentence a little bit later in section 1 that talks about the assessment and intervention program, which we'd like to see change to system, shall be administered to all students in kindergarten through grade 3. So the idea here is that the assessment and intervention program, so there's confusion around, or a disconnect between, of course, we want the assessment component of that administered to all students. We need to be progress monitoring, screening, et cetera. But the intervention program, it just says shall be administered to all students. There may be students that don't need intervention. And so they felt that that was a little bit problematic and would like to see those two pieces separated out. So that, yes, of course, the district's system of literacy, including the assessment, would be administered to all children. But intervention, the follow-up sentence, the intervention system shall be administered to any student with reading difficulties. So removing the implication that we need to apply the intervention system to all students, those that may not need it.
Okay.
Thank you,
Lawley.
Mr. Chairman. To read correctly, wouldn't we want to change a little bit more the sentence right above it to say the assessment and strike and intervention system? And then you add your second sentence, because otherwise I think there's still confusion.
Yes, Chairman Scott, Representative Lawley, I believe that's correct. It would need to happen. And then in section 1B, students, there's a statement there that says students not showing appropriate reading competence under this section shall be placed on an individual reading plan to remedy the reading related difficulty utilizing an appropriate evidence-based intervention program. So we see that, that piece there, evidence-based. But then it goes on to say, which may include a group reading plan, and the cabinet recommends striking that. They feel that that group reading plan is very much an archaic practice, and it's counterproductive to a portion of that section earlier that requires school districts to provide the reading plan and updates to parents. That districts would be spending a lot of time redacting if it was a group reading plan. And so they just felt like nobody really does that. So it's just an opportunity to remove that and clean it up.
Yes, that came in with the Senate amendment 20 years ago on the floor. And I think was motivated by a particular member who had a wife that was in the area. So it wasn't part of the original legislation, I think.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then moving on to the last recommendation is section 1, part C. This is about the district's reporting requirements. And part of that, you'll see in the center of that, a strike through that strikes out the student-teacher ratio. And this is referencing the types of groups when interventions are happening. What is the teacher-student ratio? And in discussing this with school district personnel that serve on that cabinet, it's just really impractical. It's quite frankly, it's impossible because any district at any point is going to have numerous, I mean, if you think of even just a school, one school is going to have any number of different types of configurations, kindergarten through third grade, based on what the students' needs are. So they may have students that are, in a tier 3 where they're receiving one-on-one instruction. You may have students that are in a small group. And at any time, those are in flux. We have districts that are doing short cycles of review and potentially every 6 weeks, looking at students' growth and progress and moving students in and out of those. And so that just changes frequently. And so it really becomes a very meaningless piece of information that they're being asked to try to quantify. So they would ask that that be removed. And then just lastly, there was, from some, there was a desire to remove the duplicity of reporting the use of certified tutors and the use of instructional facilitators and paraprofessionals in kindergarten through grade 3, trained in the delivery of evidence-based instruction and intervention programs selected by the district, because it's required in the WDE 626 data collection. But then also several districts felt like that's part of their professional development plan that is also submitted, and they felt like that was just a duplication of reporting. But it wasn't unanimous. There was at least one district that said that they felt that by having it as a reporting requirement, it did bring it to the surface, and that administrators in the district were sure to be aware of it and making sure that it was happening. So I'll just leave that with you. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shelley, I just want to tell you, thank you in the panel. Thank you so much. This has been a ton of work on your guys' side of things to really dive in, find out what this looks like on the boots on the ground, and finding the concerns, right? And I think it was the panel's recommendation last year as well to stop messing with the dang statute and let us do what we need to do before you start really altering it. And I took those words very seriously as well. I take these recommendations very seriously. I think we should definitely adopt what you guys are looking at and have a serious discussion on them. But I just want to say thank you, and please pass that along to everybody else that was involved in these recommendations, because we're not the experts. And we need to listen to what you guys have to say as we're moving forward and creating law that's going to change the way our kids learn. So I really appreciate the work that you guys did on this. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Brown.
Anything else? Representative Overmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regard to the professional development plan and the continuing education piece of that, where is the starting point for that continuing professional development? Is there an assumption that the graduates from the University of Wyoming have a certain base knowledge about reading difficulties, and that's your starting point, or are you assuming they know nothing? Or what is the starting point? How do you work with the University of Wyoming in determining what your expectation is of one of their graduates?
Chairman and Representative Obermuller, thanks for asking that question. That's a great question. So what we find is that as the stakeholder committee that worked through this, we recognize that not all of our teachers are graduates of the University of Wyoming. They come from other states' programs as well, surrounding universities, or they may be already an experienced educator that comes to the state, but we can't be sure of what their level of training has been. So I think that the stakeholder committee approached it from that type of a vantage point. How do we provide districts with a model that is compliant to the desire of the statute, but also provide some flexibility in being able to have teachers or have administrators, as they're working with their teachers, work on specific areas. So the way that the model is set up is that it's divided out, as you'll recall, based on what the teacher's role is. So whether they're a classroom teacher or whether they are an interventionist or a specialist that is working specifically with remediation of those types of challenges, or if they're a teacher that is involved in the kindergarten through third grade space, but not necessarily directly providing instruction around literacy. So a PE teacher, an art teacher, something of that nature. And so the time and amount of requirements for the first 3-year cycle through are pretty set. And this is what you need to, this is what each role would need to do. It's specific to that. But then after that, as it continues, the next cycle, districts have the flexibility to be able to say, this teacher is really great with this. And as she or he is working on their professional development plan, they might identify an interest area specifically that they align with the parameters that were suggested and now codified in rule, to be able to afford districts that differentiation when meeting those the amount of time requirements. Does that answer your question?
I'd like to zero in just a little closer on the University of Wyoming, and if you have discussions about what your expectations are of a graduate out of the University of Wyoming in regard to their level of knowledge, what that level of knowledge about reading difficulties should be coming into in just that narrow area.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Obermuller. So we have had conversations. We've worked collaboratively on a couple of projects. We participated together in the Hunt Institute's literacy project and Dr. Rush was a part of that. So we have had those conversations. And again, I just hearken back to the idea that while they work to provide a well-rounded graduate, they are novice teachers. There's a difference. And that I think is key to the ongoing professional development that's necessary to continue to grow educators into the type of teachers that we need.
Okay, let's move along here. Seeing no other questions, is there any public comment on any? Once, going twice? Don't see any. Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to direct that we get a bill put together to clean this language up, including on the sentence. It's actually the third paragraph down, the assessment. It starts with the assessment and intervention program system. And actually, if I heard that correctly, that it needs some wordsmithing in there. So it would be the assessment and then strike and intervention program system, all three of those out of it and all four of those words out of it.
Mr. Chairman, I think there are a few additional amendments that would be required. So if you'll just give LSO latitude and make those.
Excellent. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, committee, that'll give us something to work from that the public will have had a chance to see. And I would recommend we just go ahead and do that as a directive and include the potential desire option at the bottom of the page. It's easier to include it and then take it out if we decide that's not worthwhile. Because that gets rid of that duplicative reporting. So, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say again, thank you. It is very inspiring to hear from people who have such a passion for the work that they're doing. It truly is. And all of you that spoke today on this issue was really showed that. And it is really inspiring. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Okay, committee, I think we're ready to move on at this point. The next topic is the K2 mental health, and we're going to lead off with Matt Wilmarth, who's provided material that was in the packet, So Matt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Matt Wilmarth, LSO Senior School Finance Analyst. I bring forward today item number 13-01 on the online materials and within your packet, an issue brief that updates materials that were provided to the committee, as well as the Mental Health and Vulnerable Adult Task Force that is also working parallel on this item. That information was shared last year. This issue brief updates that and also provides additional detail by school district. Just to kind of step back, the K-12 funding model provides resources to school districts for both counselors and pupil support. And those resources are allocated based upon the recommendations of the state's consultants from the 2005 recalibration effort. And counselors are provided specifically at the middle and high school level for every 250 ADM or students at each of those schools that are not considered an alternative school or a small school, and that threshold is 49 students. Additionally, we have a category or a position within the model titled pupil support, and this is a generic component or staffing category that the consultants at the time provided flexibility to school districts to hire nurses, social workers, or other additional counselors that best meets those needs of the students in the schools or districts as appropriate. Each of these counselor positions and pupil support positions are resourced at a certified teacher salary within the model and associated benefits. Since 2011, school districts have reported these positions by salary type. So they report to the Department of Education whether or not these positions are resourced through its block grant dollars, federal dollars, or reimbursed through the special education funding. So on page 2 of the issue brief, we've identified in figure 1 the number of K-12 funding model state-funded positions for pupil support and counselors. I'm taking a kind of a broad stroke here and saying, hey, these positions could be utilized for purposes of mental health. In order to really analyze how districts are utilizing these positions, we would have to visit each of the schools and see what those responsibility of those staff members are. It may not fit perfectly as mental health counselor or a social worker that directly addresses mental health for a student. But the purpose of this kind of broad analysis is to illuminate what districts are doing with these resources that could address mental health issues within the district. So figure 1 really summarizes the difference between the block grant positions allocated to school districts and do they hire all those positions. In all years dating back to 2011-12 through estimated school year 23-24, school districts have not hired in total the number of positions allocated to them. In fact, this most recent school year was the highest difference, meaning districts hired 83 fewer positions than allocated through the block grant for pupil support and counselor positions. Another difficult analysis, or what we're not able to do within this analysis, is compare on an individual position basis on salaries and compensation. So again, this is only an FTE analysis. It's not a total compensation analysis. So that is one of the shortfalls of just looking at only FTEs. On page 3 of the issue brief, I provide a little bit more analysis on the number of pupil support and counselor positions that are allocated within the model in total. And you can see that in figure 2. In table 1, at the bottom of page 3, I then break out the pupil support and counselor positions identified by funding type, so state dollars and federal dollars or other funds. And then also whether or not they're identified as a non-special education staff or a special education staff. And recall, special education under state dollars is 100% reimbursed. The trends over time don't fluctuate too much. There's more than 500 of these positions through the non-special education funding. And on the state side, a majority, the non-special education positions are majority funded by state block grant dollars. About 40 to 60 positions are funded by federal dollars, and very minor number 1.7 this most recent year through federal dollars. On the special education side, there are 300 to now 461 positions that we would consider pupil support or counselors, 100% reimbursed. I will say one observation through this analysis is that we saw a shift in the number of nurses that were moved from block grant dollars to special education dollars, around 30 FTE for this school year. What that does is it frees up districts' block grant dollars to prioritize elsewhere, and then it moves that onto the special education reimbursement.
I'm gonna hold just a minute on that. Let me ask are you through going through your memo?
Mr. Chairman, I have probably another 2 minutes or so.
Go ahead, let's finish that.
So that was I wanted to highlight that. You can see which district it is on the appendices. Or I can point it out in the appendices if you wish. But that was one observation in looking at and analyzing the data. We did see an uptick in the special education side of things and a decrease in the block grant dollar side of things. Figure
So
3.
they're playing games?
Mr. Chairman, I think they're just utilizing the special education reimbursement and block grant dollars to their best ability. Again, it also might be a reporting error. I don't know. The report that we use to analyze this data is the fall snapshot, which is an estimate of their anticipated staffing allocations. The final school year allocations may be different. Figure 3 might be the most important in terms of comparing the K-12 money or K-12 model allocations by pupil support and counselors to what actually is happening on a statewide basis. Since 2011-12 to this most recent school year, school districts continually to hire more counselor positions than are allocated. That's not a new phenomenon. And then they also hire fewer pupil support positions than are allocated. Again, not a new phenomenon, but in total, districts hire fewer positions in these categories than what is allocated.
Mr. Chairman. And sorry, you wanted to
go. Again, Mr. Chairman, this analysis does not get to the underlying compensation, salary and benefits. So again, those are different than what the model provides. I will say in the 2020 recalibration, and I kind of footnoted this in here, your consultants did recommend a alternative allocation of these resources. Specifically, they recommended a specific guidance counselor or counselor position at the elementary school level, which is not currently provided in the formula. But they also reduced the pupil support position. Pupil support is allocated on the basis first on the at-risk count or the at-risk proxy that is reported by school districts. They still recommended that allocation. What they did recommend was to eliminate any additional pupil support staff on the basis of the school size. So they really shifted their recommendation to elementary guidance counselors based on the number of students in the schools, and then lowered the recommendation in the number of pupil support. But in total, they recommended 186 more positions at about $16 million per year than what is currently allocated. The legislature did not adopt that recommendation through its 2020 recalibration process, but that's where your most recent recommendations from your consultants sit. The, in response to the mental health task force work last year, the legislature did adopt a budget appropriation through the budget bill, section 331. For 2 years, it is appropriated $10 million to the Department of Education to allocate to school districts for mental health positions on top of the block grant. It's my understanding the Department of Education is going to allocate that $5 million each year. And those allocations by the law are allocated on the basis of average daily membership. So each school district will receive mental health positions or additional resources they can either use to contract or hire new staff or pay additional salaries to current staff for the purposes specifically related to mental health. And that is a temporary stopgap. It's, you know, about $10 million per year less than what your consultants have recommended on top of current allocations. Just to highlight the appendices, Mr. Chairman, Appendix A identifies by school district the allocations from the block grant model. Appendix B shows the actual non-special education positions. So if you take those two appendices together and you subtract Appendix A by Appendix B, that'll be your difference by school district. Albany County School District number 1 hires about 10 more. Laramie County School District number 1 hires approximately, on the math, about 48 less positions. They're the district that saw a dramatic decrease in their non-special education mental health professionals. I think they're the one who moved nurses to special education. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that was the observation that ferreted out in this analysis this year. Appendix C and D on a statewide basis break down the non-special education in Appendix C for state-funded, federally funded, and other funded positions for counselors, or what the Department of Education has grouped as pupil support. You can see that the school nurses in Appendix C, the last row under the state-funded section, you can see there were 169 nurses last year. There's 136.7 nurses this year. If you go to Appendix D, again, that same state-funded section, school nurses increased from 6.6 to 37.2. So again, that's just highlighting how to interpret these appendices. And with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to take any questions from the committee.
Let me ask a very fundamental question, both of you and committee members that may be knowledgeable. I was surprised to see this analysis in terms of positions in counselors and student support and whatnot. And the question I'm going to ask is, what is the management council really looking for when they assign as mental health? Because when I think of mental health, I think of the serious mental illnesses, which do get expressed often at the high school level age, the schizophrenia and whatnot. I think of other things that are various kinds of mental illness, and I don't think of the counseling sort of things that you know, what courses do you take and that kind of stuff. What do we know about what our focus is supposed to be in this topic, and what is meant by mental health? And I may ask.
I can share a little light on that. Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
and I'm hoping we'll hear from our management.
I've been talking with Representative Lloyd Larson from the Mental Health Task Force, and they are looking at the AWARE program, and they're looking at the BAR program, and both those are coming up in the next presentation that we'll have. But the AWARE program and how it's worked and successes that it's had in Fremont County, especially with all the districts that are there, they've had real good successes. In my home district, they've had real good success with the AWARE program. The BAR program is a new one, and the Mental Health Task Force kind of likes that, and they're trying to figure out, as I understand it from Representative Larson, how to maybe meld these two together and come up with something along that line. So they wanted us to be aware of it because they're going to come to us with a recommendation, and we really need to be aware, I'm not using that word. We need to be
Prepared.
prepared. Yes, aware of aware. Yes, there you go.
And those programs are more in the traditional mental health areas, as I read it.
I think that a superintendent or Dustin Brown could easily address what Aware has done and would enlighten everybody and bring us up to speed. So.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So from the Management Council perspective, it really isn't necessarily just the treating severe mental illness side, which we are doing through that task force and elsewhere. When you look at the recommendations from the RIDE committee, for example, one of their top recommendations was to address education-specific mental health concerns, right? So that was one of their key recommendations. When we've heard from teachers, administrators, mental health concerns for their mental health in the school setting has been a resonant theme that we've been hearing for the last few years. So what can we do to better take care of their mental health and understand it? And honestly, what we should be doing at this point really is interviews and asking the folks in this room as well as teachers who we need more of them to show up, ask what are the concerns? What should we be doing? What can we do to help? And then at the same time, students in classrooms are feeling quite a bit of pressure and are having mental health struggles and challenges that they haven't had in the past. This is new. And it's not necessarily just the emergent, acute circumstances where we need an immediate response. It's the broader experience where we have people that are not enjoying their participation in school. They don't feel like it's worth their time. They have poor morale, negative behavior. Those are the kinds of themes that we're hearing. Social media contributes to that. There's a lot of things that contribute to that. What can we do? So this is outside of what we're looking at over in Labor Health Committee and in the task force, very specific to students and teachers in the education system, the K-12 education system, what we can do better. So honestly, hearing from some of these counselors, if we could get some of these counselors to come in that we don't hire enough of, as we can see from the data that we got today, and hear from them, what can we be doing better to mitigate that? But I know that part of that is work that we've done through this committee and through the Accountability and Education Select Committee years ago. We created new pressures. We created more rigorous education. We heaped on more standards and more accountability, and that leads to stress. It also led to performance, right? So we got better test scores and angrier students and angrier teachers. So what can we, right, Representative Berger, probably not fine. What can we do to try and maintain this high level of performance that we've succeeded at while going back to the point where we have a lot of joy in education and people look forward to showing up to class, both as the teachers and as the students? And this also gets to our retention of teachers. We have a lot of teachers that we're burning out and they're leaving the profession. And we know that through studies that we have requested through this committee over the last few years for getting departure analysis. I think that was, is that Dr. Stoddard that was doing some of that work, I think. So we've heard that. And so when we look to Management Council, that's what Management Council is looking for. It's not being redundant with what we're doing on crisis situations and the severe mental illness, Mr. Co-Chairman, that you're talking about. It is more of the everyday mental health of our students and our professionals in education. And I mean, from my perspective and for being on the Management Council, I want to hear the feedback. I want to take some testimony from the community and say, what can we do? What is causing stress? what would make a difference. Counselors will make a difference, but that's the treatment side of the equation to some degree. We could look at the prevention side of the equation, where we're just not causing as much stress and we're doing things that get us back to the joy of learning, so that, you know, my kids and other kids continue to go to school, right? My little kids are still loving school. My older kids, as they were graduating, they were pretty burned out and they were ready to be done. I'd like my little kids to continue through the entire education process, and the last day of high school will be really sad that, you know, that great experience was over. So it's a different concept than the critical emergent behavior and the severe mental illness, I think, that you were thinking of, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, yeah, and I recognize going beyond the severe mental illness. I know that's only a small component, fortunately, of the mental health problem, but I guess I'm questioning how much some of these other counselors have to do with the really mental health problems. And so I'm looking for some guidance as to what we're really supposed to be looking at.
Let's ask.
Let's,
Mr. Chairman, let's ask.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's go on to the aware.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think, you know, this first presentation is one of many that you're going to receive today. And, you know, I will tee up you've already brought it up, Mr. Chairman. The Department of Education has a couple programs that they have administered with school districts. They will discuss those. A couple years ago, you implemented a law to allow school-based Medicaid services. We only have one school district participating in that, but the Department of Health is here to enlighten you on what that has to offer. And then
that is a separate issue, I think.
Well, Mr. Chairman, but that program can be tapped by school districts to address some of these, maybe perhaps needs that districts are looking for funding purposes, to hire, whether that's in their community or in their school district. They can contract services and get reimbursed for part of that cost through the school-based Medicaid services. And then, as Senator Office indicated, there are folks in the audience who can share their experiences in the most recent, you know, school years on what their needs are, what they're seeing. And so all of these presentations today are here to kind of provide information on what perhaps school districts are seen as additional needs, or perhaps and to provide the committee what is currently available to school districts through various programs, whether they're state or federally funded. And again, another part of the Management Council directive is to coordinate the work with the Mental Health and Vulnerable Adult Task Force. So we don't have two legislative committees going in different directions. So with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to take any further questions.
And I have cut off questions on that, so I heard one down here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, the question is directly related to, I think you said it was Laramie One that moved some of their nurses over to the special ed side of things. I'm just curious, I do know that last year, Laramie One came to us and told us that they had been doing similar circumstances with some of their, and self-reported some of their issues with, I believe it was behavioral intervention specialists, BISS, and that they had noted that they were not spending enough time with the special ed students. So they actually self-reported, said, hey, look, we screwed up. We're cutting those positions. What is the cutoff? Do we have a cutoff of how much time an individual is supposed to be working with a student with special needs or students with special needs versus non-special needs students before they can report to the special education and have that 100% reimbursed back from the state?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, the Department of Education has staffing guidelines that school districts are to adhere to essentially, if this is allowable reimbursement. If a special education teacher diverts 100% of its time to special education and students with an IEP, it's a fully 100%, that salary is fully 100% reimbursed. Staff members who provide a part of their salary or time dedicated to a student with an IEP or special education needs have to fill out a time and effort log. So a school nurse who spends maybe 10% of its time dedicated to special education can claim that 10% as part of its reimbursement. So that may be part of what's going on here, is that they are doing time and effort logs rather than 100% time. I don't know, but school districts do have staffing guidelines that they have to adhere to from the Department of Education, and that is kind of the guidance. But I'll just leave it at that.
It does seem to me maybe we've found a topic that's outside the mental health area, but may be important in terms of our school funding system.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly where I was going to go with this. I feel like what we see here is the proclivity of everything to get muddied very quickly. And when you start getting into that type of stuff, I mean, it's so difficult for anybody to sit there and have that discussion with the student and then go, oh, well, I need to make sure that I fill out a time and effort form to make sure that we're reimbursing this or whatever that case may be. So
I think
I appreciate the effort on that and giving us that information, because to me, that's very clear. And it's clearer in the fact that we have multiple people going into this, but it's now muddier in the fact that we have a lot of people involved in the K through 12 mental health stuff that we don't really, we don't put money into the model for, number one, because we haven't adopted anything from our recalibration efforts. But number two, even going back from the 2005, we've shifted away our priorities as to what the 2005 recalibration looks like, and the school districts are having to adjust as they see fit. So
I think we've surfaced an issue that we may need to revisit during the recalibrations.
And Mr. Chairman and Representative Brown, I just want to make everybody clear, this is a very broad analysis. These staff members address more than just mental health. I am generically using this as a proxy to estimate what resources may be available. Not all these positions just strictly deal with mental health.
Let's move on.
Representative Clausen has a question.
Representative Clausen has a question. Is that right?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Matt, with your analysis, when I was on the school board, I was always trying to figure out, how do we measure success with our counselors? I would look at the different schools and I would look at, graduation rates or test scores or absenteeism, suicide rates, counseling sessions is pure mental health counseling sessions, not just, working on class schedules. When you went through all your data, did you find anywhere that you could pinpoint that we could look at success of our counselors and how we've invested our money and how that's paying off for our state?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clausen, no. Again, kind of my opening comments, even just this broad stroke of analysis, you would have to interview the staff members or the schools in the districts to really identify what the duties of each of these staff members are, and then extrapolate that to the success of the students. I didn't go there.
Mr. Chairman.
Interruptions.
Just, briefly on that point, it's a very good one. And in talking with counselors from our district here, we have some exceptional counselors at the high school, and one of them is just incredibly trained and educated and has so much skill in engaging with students and could do wonderful things, but most of his responsibilities are administrative, right? He spends most of his time with papers and computers and doesn't actually do what he's trained to do. Those are exactly, being that counselor. These are the kinds of things that I think we struggle with. And we do hire highly qualified counselors in many of our schools. Again, still not necessarily enough, but how are we actually using them? We had the same conversation years ago with instructional facilitators, where we were struggling with instructional facilitators actually being instructional facilitators. And that was something we tried to work on. I think this is another area where, even where we have staff, this one individual I'm thinking of, if he spent all of his time just working with students as he was trained, I think our school would be better off. But that's not what he does. He does many, many other things. And so those are the types of things I think we can elucidate. I think Representative Clouston's, idea of how do we actually qualify and quantify this is an interesting one. We don't know.
Representative Obermuller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, on your appendix A and B, when I was looking at this and looking at the titles, the under appendix B, the funding model, total pupil support and counselor positions sounds, at least as a layman reading of that, sounds broader than the appendix B title of mental health positions funded. So when I looked at this, I wasn't alerted to, you got 543 in this, what I thought was kind of a broader category as compared to this number 460, which zeroed in on the mental health piece of this. But so should my understanding be that these are interchangeable words, or how should we look at this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Obermuller, yes, I mean, that's kind of the blunt instrument that I use. The pupil support and counselor allocation through the block grant and reference those are mental health positions. Is that right or wrong? I don't know. Again, we have to identify what each of those individuals are doing to really measure what roles and responsibilities they have. Those two headings are interchangeable. That's the categories that the issue brief analyzes it under, and how the Department of Education categorizes in its analysis those two staff categories in the block grant.
Burger.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So in Union County School District number 1, we have a Project Aware program counselor that runs our Project Aware program. Been doing it for the last 2.5 years. So our district, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's no funding in the model, we get the model, the block grant. We're using those funds wherever they pay for it, but they're using it in funds that are given to us. It could be SR funds, it could be the model funds, but nothing in the model says you have a Project Aware coordinator, correct? Is that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, the Project Aware is a federal grant, so
Federal grant.
the district,
Got it.
if they're hiring staff with those funds, would be reporting those as a federally funded position. Would not be included in Appendix A or B by school district, but it would be included in the federal funded categorization for non-special education staff. Once that grant expires or runs out, or if it's not renewed or whatever, the districts have the flexibility through the block grant to hire that position through counselors or pupil support or their central office administrative allocations.
Mr. Chairman, follow up. And that, just to let this committee know that it's a great program. He works with our teachers, our students, and our community. He does amazing jobs at this coordinator and works with our counselors. I call them guidance counselors in the high school because they guide kids in their curriculum and what directions are going to go, and they counsel as well. But if we want to hear testimony or let's reach out to these districts that are utilizing Project Aware, and let's hear from them. Let's invite them to the committee meeting and get them here. That's one thing I haven't seen. I don't know if we can invite them. I would love to hear about testimony about what they're doing and why is it working. And that's what I want to hear.
Mr. Chairman, I think
Go
you'll hear
ahead.
that during committee or during public comment.
Yeah. So we hope to get to that. Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. The next thing I've got here is the State Department of Education. They
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Dickie Shaner, Department of Ed. Our team is currently presenting to the Mental Health Task Force. And so Wanda Maloney is here physically. Dustin Brown is physically in Kimmer. And so if we could go with maybe some of the other agencies first, and then when Wanda comes back, and then we can zoom in Dustin when they're done there. If
Okay.
that would work. Thank you.
Okay, we'll handle it that way then.
Thank you.
Yeah, Department of Family Services.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Schilling. I'm currently serving as the Senior Administrator for the Social Services Division at the Department of Family Services. Reflecting just briefly on the conversation leading up to this, I'm going to keep my comments fairly brief, as I believe our role in K through 12 mental health is fairly limited and really restricted to our participation in IEP teams, 504 teams, individual case management that happens in the collaboration in our local offices between the agency and the school districts. I will stay and remain available for questions should there be conversation that comes up. I think that provides more of an opportunity for us to jump in, but I think right now I'm just here to answer questions and to be available.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Workforce Services, anybody hear from them?
Hello, Mr. Chairman, committee. My name is Liz Gagan, and I am the Director of the Department of Workforce Services. And sitting next to me is Nikki Harper, who is the administrator for our vocational rehabilitation program. And she is going to talk about the services that we can offer K through 12 in the mental health realm.
Okay, proceed.
Thank you, Director Gagan. Good morning, Chairman, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We did share a memo with you all, and I would just like to take a little brief moment to highlight a few points. To start with, I would like to share a very brief overview of the vocational rehabilitation program. We help individuals with disabilities, really any disability, including mental health disabilities, which might be anxiety, depression, substance dependence disorder, like Chairman Scott indicated earlier, maybe a more severe mental health disability like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. The primary mission of vocational rehabilitation is to empower individuals with disabilities to obtain, maintain, and advance in competitive integrated employment. State vocational rehabilitation programs are funded through a partnership between federal and state funds. Our main funding source is the Rehabilitation Act, which is administered through the Rehabilitative Services Administration within the U.S. Department of Education. We get a formula award, which is then matched with state and other funds, typically at an 80 to 20 match, 80% federal funds to 20% state and other funds. At this point in time, vocational rehabilitation has two primary mechanisms for providing supports to students with mental health challenges, and these are the most recently awarded Disability Innovation Fund grant and pre-employment transition services. So the Disability Innovation Fund grant was awarded to us at the end of last year in the amount of $10 million to be utilized over the next 5 years. The main purpose of this grant is to enhance employment skills, provide mental health supports, and increase economic outcomes for our students with disabilities. This grant is to be, the services through this grant is to be provided in partnership with independent living centers and schools. While we are still in the early stages of developing the grant, some of the key components or some of the takeaways that I would like to highlight are the opportunity for us to contract with transition navigators to help our students and families navigate the path to employment. We also are seeking to increase access to mental health supports for our students through the use of technology, telehealth, and other platforms. We are exploring how mental health the mental health barriers by identifying best practices to address mental health challenges that impact employment outcomes. Another component of the grant is enhancing parental engagement. We believe that by empowering parents and having parents play a greater role in transition planning for our students, we can see greater success. And of course, a main component is promoting work experiences and other work-based learning opportunities, be it through an internship, volunteer opportunities, or other paid work experiences for our students. There will also be a website for students and parents to access mental health resources as well as employment resources to help navigate their future path. Our hope is that through increasing mental health supports, engaging parents and families, and giving students opportunities for work-based learning, that we can create a seamless transition for students with disabilities to enter competitive integrated employment. The other avenue for providing K through 12 students and youth with mental health support is through pre-employment transition services. These services are mandated by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. This act also mandates that states set aside 15% of their federal award to provide pre-employment transition services. These services are exploratory in nature, allowing students to receive comprehensive information that they can then use for future career planning. Pre-ed services, sorry, we call them pre-eds because pre-employment transition, kind of a long word, are provided in a variety of settings, from one-on-one to group sessions to workshops. And these services are provided sometimes through our counselors in school settings, sometimes through contract employees. We might be in an institution, we might be at a work setting. The goal is to meet the student where they're at. This act requires us to provide 5 core services. These services are job exploration counseling, work-based learning, counseling on post-secondary education opportunities, workplace readiness training, and instruction on self-advocacy. The purpose behind these services, or the intent, is that by supporting our students early on to develop these critical skills, develop coping skills, do career exploration, that we can set them up for a smoother transition into post-secondary education or employment. And should a student require more than the 5 basic services offered by pre-employment transition services, they can always apply for general rehabilitation services. But then, of course, they would have to be determined.
With my kids, I appreciate all they do. And yes, she is totally right about providing those services. In my realm with IEP kids, it just really helps a lot. If you want to ask me more questions about it, please ask me and I can go through a lot more. I can tell you a story for a lot. If you have about 2 hours, then we can do that. But anyways, our continued work through them is amazing. And that's just, you can go longer than that, but there's a lot of success stories between school districts and VR services, especially over the last 20 years since I've been working and coming together to create, looking at the barriers, especially the barriers of how do we share these kids, these students, and how do we share them to move them on after 21 to be productive members in society. Thank you.
Now I'm going to ask you a question. Yes, sir. You found the services that she was describing valuable for your students. What's your sense of the degree of outreach to other districts? Are they aware and using these services or not?
Great question, Mr. Chairman. So as I speak with my colleagues throughout the state, to me, it seems like if you have a VR counselor in your community, it works out very well. You work very closely together. We have a VR community, VR service person that works in our community, and we also have one for the Valley, but they work in Evanston, but they still travel to the Valley. If you have them in your community, it's great. Rural areas, that's the challenge, and we continue to work through those challenges. We're talking about this piece. It's so huge. It's called transition. That piece is about transition, and transition is many-fold. Okay, and there's no book about it. It takes a very experienced teacher and a very experienced advocate and parent to work with and just continue to reach out to VR because they will reach out to you. We will figure it out. It takes a lot, but it will figure it out. But that's my experience.
Let me call them the two gentlemen over here that were.
Need to be on a mic,
Yeah.
Please.
please.
Hi, good morning. Jay Curtis, Superintendent, Park County 1 in Powell. And I just wanted to, I'll echo everything that I've heard this morning. Our district works very closely with Workforce Services. And in fact, we recently signed on to a grant with Workforce Services, the DIF grant in Powell. We're doing some things that are a little bit different with micro certifications at the high school level in Powell. I think that work just is kind of baked in. They've actually used our district as kind of, they looked at that work and said, you know what, that should be a model for this DIF grant work. And so, yes, I can't speak for other districts. All I can say is that, yes, their districts are aware and districts are using that service to a high degree.
Okay, thank you. School Boards Association, if I'm getting it right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown. I'm with the Wyoming School Boards Association. I've also been the superintendent of 3 different districts in the state of Wyoming, the largest and the smallest district in the state. And I would tell you that all 3 districts that I've been in, we've worked with Workforce Services whenever our students qualified for that. And they absolutely do a great job. And some of those kids need some pretty specific training. And it's usually a success story with each one of those kids.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. I just want to add to that. Our district is working with VR at looking at adding an 18 to 21 program and trying to kind of lead the way. I don't know if you've heard about it. Yep. We've submitted a grant and we're going to try to look at, it's groundbreaking work. We've never done this before and we're trying to figure this out. And how can we do this and start it and be a model and then share that information with everybody else. One thing that teachers do, we do share information and we like to get that word out because we work collaboratively together and that's what it needs to be. And on the aspect of mental health and programs and services, remember they're IEP students and every student comes in and they fill out a form for DVR, student, person, whoever, and it's based on the individual needs. And it could be mental health services for career exploration. It could be whatever, job skills, basic skills, needing a job coach, whatever. But everybody is treated as an individual and it takes a team to decide those individual needs. And that's what we do. Am I right? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I felt like Representative Berger could be here presenting on our behalf. He really knows our program really well. And thank you to the school districts as well for your ongoing support and validation for the work that vocational rehabilitation does. Thank you.
Okay. Committee, what we're going to do next is take a break. But first, are we going to have any more public testimony on this particular area? Yes, we will right after the break.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
so we'll come back to that. Be back in 10 minutes at 5 till.
Jay, I think you could enlighten us all on what AWARE is doing and
with the WEA and the park.
And Mr. Chairman, the Department of Ed is available again, so whenever you would like to hear their presentation.
Okay, so the Department of Ed people who will be available too? Okay, we may hear from them. Proceed, Department of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. My name is Sarah Rogers. I am the Benefits Management Administrator for the Division of Healthcare Financing, Department of Health. And with me today, I have Jesse Springer, who is our Deputy Division Administrator. And I also have Justin Browning, who is our School-Based Services Program Manager. So we're happy to be here this morning to provide you an update on Medicaid school-based services. Not a lot has changed since last year when we provided an update, but I'm happy to be here to provide a few updates for you and then answer any questions you might have about our program. So our first slide here just provides a quick overview of Medicaid and CHIP eligibility. So basic eligibility for Medicaid, the family income must be less than or equal to 200% of the federal poverty level, or approximately $51,000 for a family of 3. Another way to access Medicaid is through our Children's Mental Health Waiver, which is a short-term and community-based waiver program. It's for children who are experiencing serious emotional disturbance, who might otherwise be hospitalized, and whose parents may have to relinquish custody of their child for them to receive mental health services. Those who qualify for the Children's Mental Health Waiver could then access the CME or our care management entity that provides high-fidelity wraparound services, care coordination, peer support, and respite. And then they would also be eligible for the full Medicaid state plan benefits. And just another addition on the Children's Mental Health Waiver, that is based on the child's income. So as long as all children, they have the medical need, basically all children would qualify for that program. On our next slide, we provide a list of, next slide, behavioral health coverage services for children. These include outpatient mental health and substance use services. For example, these are services provided at a community mental health center, a substance abuse center, or a physician or behavioral health provider's practice or clinic. We have inpatient mental health and substance use services. These are services provided at a general hospital, critical access hospital, or a psychiatric hospital. We have applied behavior analysis. This is for children with a diagnosis of autism. Again, the care management entity and the Children's Mental Health Waiver. Specialty treatment for co-occurring conditions such as developmental disabilities and mental health. Psychiatric residential treatment facility services, or PRTFs. And then pharmacy and medication assisted therapy. And just to add to this, Medicaid does not impose any cost sharing or co-payments for behavioral health services for children, or actually any services for children. There's no co-payment. So next we'll get into our Medicaid school-based services. So schools are allowed as a setting for treatment by Medicaid enrolled providers. Examples of these providers are school psychologists, social workers, counselors, certified mental health workers, marriage and family therapists, speech, occupational and physical therapists and assistants, RNs, APRNs, and CNAs. In order for the services to be covered by Medicaid, they must be medically necessary and outlined in the student's IEP or IFSP and provided directly by school district employees. These services can be billed to Medicaid through the School-Based Services Program, and this began back on July 1st of 2022. The school district is the billing provider, while the school district employee or the employee providing services is the treating or rendering provider on their claim form. The program enables the state to repurpose state and local funds to the school foundation program account and creates a potential cost savings to the state by claiming federal match to on those allowed services. In school year 2021 to 2022, there were approximately 7,000 Wyoming students who met the qualifications for the Medicaid School-Based Services Program during each school year. And this was that original estimate that was established in 2021, 2022 between the Department of Health and the Department of Education. Our next slide shows how the flow of funds and reimbursement occurs. So care is delivered to the beneficiary or Medicaid eligible member in the school setting. The state pays for those allowable services when provided by a Wyoming Medicaid enrolled provider. The districts are responsible for providing documentation of services delivered, should that be requested, for example, in the event of an audit. So documentation must be kept of all services provided. The claims will get electronically submitted to Medicaid for reimbursement. Wyoming Medicaid will then reimburse the school districts for services delivered, and the district will remit funds to the Department of Education School Foundation Program account. Our next slide we added this year to show billing for the one district that is currently submitting claims. So as you will see, this is Converse County School District number 1. This is for the most recent school year, from September 1 to May 23rd of 2024. As you will see, we paid on 1,290 claims for a total of $61,096 to 4 different provider types. So the provider types who were billing were school counselors, professional counselors, speech language pathologists, and occupational therapists. The total number of Commerce County 1 students who were on an IEP was 373. Out of the 373, there were 152 members who were Medicaid enrolled, or 40.8%. And then out of the 152, they billed for 54 unique members, or 35.5% of who was eligible for Medicaid. So what more can be done for Medicaid school-based services? We currently have 5 districts who are actively enrolled as Medicaid providers. However, as you saw on the previous slide, only one of those districts is currently billing. If more districts were to voluntarily participate, there's potential for increased funding, which could be used to help create a revenue stream for the School Foundation Trust account. Should a district not be able to provide behavioral health or other medical services on site, the districts are able to serve as origination sites for telehealth visits. We continue to provide and can provide ongoing Medicaid enrollment assistance or enrollment events in the school district, which could maximize potential for school-based services billing. School-based services currently only applies to, in statute, to Medicaid children. We are suggesting that we add MCHIP as a covered group for school-based services. This would add approximately 3,500 children. However, out of those 3,500 children, they would still, the ones eligible for this program would still have to have an IEP or an IFSP. Also, there is new CMS guidance that has come out that allows Medicaid school-based services to be claimed on any medical service provided at the school district. So that means they do not have to be on an IEP or IFSP. And this is called free care, and we are researching this to see how this could be implemented in our program, and we are able to provide more information on that as we continue to research that option. And with that, we will stand for any questions.
Okay. The problem that we've got is you've illustrated there's one district that's participating. And the reason appears to be that the district doesn't get any real benefit from it because most of the expenses are special education. State will reimburse those entirely. What's the incentive for the school district? And there's considerable, from the experience I saw with Medicaid, considerable paperwork and bookkeeping involved in it, and the schools say, what's in it for us? Why bother? I'm surprised you got one. Do you have any thoughts as to what we might do to fix that problem?
Mr. Chairman, you are exactly right. The biggest barrier to this program is the lack of incentive for the districts to participate. As to what sort of incentives can come from a Medicaid perspective, I don't think we can provide that recommendation. I think that would have to come from our colleagues at the Department of Education on the types of incentives, but I do believe there needs to be some sort of financial incentive in order to get more districts to participate.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, districts are allowed to claim 100% reimbursement for any of the administrative costs associated with the school-based Medicaid services. So there is the carrot. It's just doing the work is, to mandate it would be, I guess the other option. But regardless of either scenario, under current law, whether it being optional or mandated, the administrative cost of the school-based services is 100% reimbursed.
Yeah. That doesn't seem to have motivated them. I think we're gonna have to start thinking out of the box here if we think it's worthwhile. And 49 other states are getting a significant part of their special ed costs paid by Medicaid. We're the outlier, and it has to do with our system. Looking at Mr. Shaner, what would happen if we were to impute on the special ed payments a Medicaid share and just subtract that automatically and see if that would force action? Could we start thinking about doing things like that?
Mr. Chair, Dickey Shane, Department of Ed. I can't speak to at this time what would happen, but spent many years on this topic. A lot of work has gone into it. And so happy to bring it back up again and provide this committee with more information on it if needed.
Senator Ruffus, and then, yeah.
I think I've worn out my welcome on this.
Okay, that one's.
It knows me. There we go. That over there. Oh, it came on. Look at that. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we have looked at this for, I don't know, probably 10 of the 14 years I've been on this committee, and there are a couple of other challenges, and I wanted to ask about a couple of those. One that has come up is a concern that there are a limited number of Medicaid eligible visits for an individual that is being served by Medicaid. So if it's a mental health visit, they're working with a counselor, they have a certain number that they're eligible for. One concern that we discussed is if we're billing for those through the school, then they're going to count against their total. And they would end up having less access, those students that have both counseling on their own and then counseling through the school would end up having a more limited access to mental health treatment. So can you provide some thoughts on that?
I can, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss. I believe you're referring to the thresholds and the cap limits, and those do not apply to school-based services. So they are able to receive their counseling, therapy services they need within the school district, and also the additional ones on the outside, and those would not count against their threshold.
Okay, that's good to hear. So that there wouldn't be credit towards it. They would get that additional. Another concern that has been discussed is honestly the accidental fraud or accidental misreporting, where within Medicaid, we have statutorily some pretty severe penalties in place. And anecdotally, I've heard districts that were just concerned that even, at best it would be break even for the district, but at worst they could screw something up, misfile something, and then the district would have to deal with the consequences of misfiling a Medicaid claim. What are your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I have heard some concerns from my colleague about fraud worries. I don't believe there's enough billing at the moment to have those concerns, but I don't know if you have anything else to add on that topic, because I know you've had contact with those providers.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, in order to commit fraud, there has to be some sort of intent or malicious mindset, and that is not going to be occurring at the school district since there is no financial incentive for them to participate in this program. So from my perspective, there wouldn't be any issues with fraud. It would be more of an educational piece, which we would then address with the school district.
And then, Mr. Chairman, the last comment briefly is when we looked at this before, logistically, if five school districts, the five largest school districts in the state were to participate in this program, that would more or less lead to, I think it was about 80%. I want to say we could get these values. I know we did a study of it 6 years ago, probably, so we could get updated. That would lead to 80% or so of the cost savings for the state. Those are the districts that would be most capable of actually doing the reporting because they have sufficient administrative infrastructure in place to do so. So when we looked at this before, the idea of having all 48 school districts do it was much less attractive than just finding a way to entice about 5 school districts into doing it. Have we looked at those numbers recently, or is that something maybe we could revisit? What the potential savings would be?
Senator Scott, or Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss. So based off of purely Converse County 1, if we were to use that and put that statistically to the other 48 or 47 school districts, there's potential for about 2.7 million annually, but that is a very conservative number, taking in that they would only be billing on behalf of 35.5% of their eligible population on behalf of 4 different provider types.
Chairman Scott, if I could follow up to that. The original study had between 10 and $12 million, and it was in that range of 80% is concentrated in larger school districts. There were a few bill versions before this was made voluntary that had different thresholds that were discussed by the original committee that looked at school district size or number of students that would qualify. But the voluntary, they could also just look at the highest cost children. So even if school districts billed their top 5% of children, not all the children, they probably are capturing a lot of money because the expenditures on special education are not evenly distributed. So one child might have a 2-to-1 ratio all day long. So if that district billed that student, it might be $100,000. Another child might have $5,000 of services. So it's just not evenly distributed. So there's different scenarios to do it that, you may not be required to bill all the students, but could you bill the most expensive layer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I think that's the thing that's worth exploring. If we could have, 10% of the work and get 90% of the value, that's a lot better system than us creating some mandate where, I've got $30 to bill and I'm going to spend $70 of administrative time billing it. So maybe we can give some more thoughtful consideration. The last question I would have is, do we have any capacity, and this might be a longer term plan, but if we're billing government for Medicaid, is there a way for us to streamline that and just make it a little bit easier? Or is it always necessarily a challenging administrative process and there's nothing we can do about it? Because this is another concern that we've talked a lot about over the years is the amount of training and work. And when you have the smaller districts, who's going to put in that time? Even if we are reimbursing for that time, somebody's got to do it. So is there a way we can make that substantially easier so that it's streamlined and our districts can not be spending as much time on it?
Chairman Scott, Senator Rothfuss, I think, there's a few layers to that. So you could take care of some of the school district employee concerns by putting more protections for the school district employees that they feel that they're not going to be chased for fraud. So like right now, they make an honest mistake, that they're just feeling there's a concern there. So there's, right now the statutes don't call out specific protections for school district employees in this statute, either to my knowledge, in the education statutes or in Title 42 where Medicaid school-based services is established. So, it's not saying that we wouldn't follow up on true fraud, but usually if it's an honest mistake, we will just follow up and ask them to reverse their claims and then to correct them. And then administrative simplifications, we're looking ideally, everything is already in the special education software that is used by each district. That is the record keeping system. And we translate that into a medical claim. And really all we need beyond what's already done there, that's actually a great record of what service occurred. If it has date and time, and how the length of the service. And so if somebody did an hour of counseling, you convert that into a 15-minute. Systematically, this should be happening on software that it's converting into a 4-unit, 15-minute claim. And then it should be automatically submitted to us. So it really, the school district employee should not be creating a claim for us. Their software should be doing that and submitting it. So we need to look at additional administrative simplifications. We've worked with one vendor so far, Sped Advantage, which is one used by the 5 that have enrolled. There are other softwares in the state. There's about 2 other major software players. And most of those softwares have Medicaid billing modules that ideally would make this simpler, that does the translation. There are some elements of the claims that we're looking if we can simplify. There, for instance, some of the school employees have noted they are not qualified to make the diagnosis. So we're going to seek federal guidance if we need to require the diagnosis. Sometimes they're not sure what procedure to use. So there is some opportunity there to see if we could simplify what medical procedure is used, and if there could be just a school-based services procedure for instance, for occupational therapy could be more simplified. So they're not really learning how to become medical providers. They're just, if I am on occupational therapy, there's one procedure for me. It's trying to go down that route of simplification. So this is the easiest possible. That doesn't take care of some of the other concerns about, the benefit to the district of actually participating, but trying to make it as easy as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our concerns, well, the vendors, Salesforce have come a long way. And where our concern is the reporting piece. It's not necessarily using the vendor because the vendor is doing great things, is that everybody uses the same reporting and that we stay consistent across the board. Okay. And maybe it's through the same vendor or not, but that's where a lot of confusion comes from. Now that I'm talking, this is coming from my special ed director and meeting with other special ed directors across the state. We keep that vendor and that reporting the same. And then the next question or comment I have, a question, is that the opt-in versus the mandatory. Don't do the opt-in. They don't want to play opt-in games. You either mandate it or we don't mandate it. How do you feel towards that? Those two concepts there.
You have no.
No.
Chairman Scott, Representative Berger, we're systematically, we can handle all the claims from the district with very little workload at the Department of Health. It is automated on our end. If we've got another 1 million claims, or it's probably not gonna be that much, but let's say we got 100,000, 200,000 more claims for this. 95 to 99% of those claims are gonna be processed in 15 seconds in our system, no human interaction. So it's not really a barrier on our end to process these claims. We're set up to process claims that we're very good at doing that. But the other side of, does a district participate? We've tried to follow the voluntary model, recruiting, do all the things that we were instructed by statute. And this is the status we're at.
Let's hold it right there. That question is really one that we're going to have to talk to the districts about, and we're going to have to think about. It's not fair to ask Medicaid on this one. So,
Representative Lawley has a question.
yeah, Representative,
Oh, there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talked about some out of the box thinking. Because we keep rolling around. I've only been here one term, but with this and keep talking about the same thing about the incentive for the districts and I think that that's one idea, but out of the box, completely out of the box, and maybe not possible because I know this is a very tightly strung program and it's dictated by the federal government, obviously. But since we're doing 100% reimbursement at the state level, why can't they be in a position legally to make all these claims for reimbursement rather than at the district level? I mean, is there some way that we can do it? It's almost like a subrogation because I feel like that's where the money's coming from, ultimately, with the 100% reimbursement. Could they be, is there a way for them to qualify to be in the position to do that? And probably they don't want to do it, but if we really felt the money was worth it, is there a way to weave that in legally where, because of the 100% reimbursement, that the state handles those claims for that money? Because ultimately it's going to go back to them.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley. So it is the district themselves who's the vendor providing this service, not the Department of Education. So therefore, it's going to be the district who is submitting claims to the Department of Health. Additionally, federal mandate is the district must obtain a parental consent form, which is part of the responsibility authorizing the district to bill Medicaid.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So is that again statutory or in rules that the district and in the in-school programs is the only one that can qualify as that vendor? Again, that's kind of what I'm getting at is legally they're the one, they're actually where the service is provided, but financially speaking, it's the state that's providing with 100% reimbursement. I mean, is that something in statute?
Chairman Scott, Representative Lawley, the district needs to be the billing provider on the claim.
Okay.
Other states have set up billing support services to support districts that might be provided across multiple districts or across counties, or districts have come together to hire a claims biller. Because this is not really a skill set that's in most school districts, especially small school districts, that you would have somebody who knows how to do claims. So they're relying on their special education vendor to have some of that expertise in terms of billing. But, in some cases, the volume may be too low to hire a full-time position. I don't know how much time was spent at the one participating district, but I doubt it was more than 40 hours of work to bill $60,000. So it's just finding the right skill set, and then that person could actually support the districts. One of the challenges, we're not sure that Medicaid can directly provide that support because we're the payer. So we generally try to help and coach, but we don't create the claim generally.
Follow up.
Okay.
So again, I go back to the fact that the benefit is to the state, which is what we're concerned about. So has some other states kind of created a statewide system where they assist districts, especially smaller districts, but there's uniformity? I mean, it seems like a state level solution might be helpful and worthwhile here, but that's what I'm trying to get at.
Chairman Scott, Representative Lawley, this isn't really a direct answer to your question. One of the obstacles is there's multiple special education software systems in use within Wyoming. So that is one obstacle. Each district picks its own, and then that's reimbursed, I believe, through the 100% system. And
let me jump in here. Representative Lawley, the problem we've got is that we are the only state with 100% reimbursement, and the courts gave us that system. It has removed the incentive for the school district to participate, and I think we're kind of up against it on that one. So we're gonna have to get creative in what we do, if it's worth doing. Medicaid is complicated enough. So there's some question about the value, of it entirely. So, did I see Representative Provenza, did you had a question?
Mr. Chairman, my question kind of aligned with Representative Lawley's.
So, okay, so that's, so let me ask one question here. Would there be problems with Medicaid if we had a policy where we were just requesting on the major claims? Because we're having a problem with occasional cases that get very expensive, and that do cause problems for the state and for the school districts. If we just made claims on those, would that cause trouble with you guys? Is it an all or nothing proposition?
Chairman Scott, if all the districts enrolled and only billed 1 or 2 students apiece, that would be no problem at all. So they could bill as few because it's optional, or as many, up to 100% of covered Medicaid individuals with an IEP, IFSP. The only follow-up to like the creative thinking on the last bullet of our slide deck, we had that there's other services that possibly could be covered. To our knowledge, and I apologize, we really aren't familiar with school funding. To our knowledge, the other medical services, which might be like mental health services to a kid not with an IEP, are not covered at 100% cost reimbursement. So, possibly that could be the incentive that the district keeps some portion of that funding, because those are not inside the 100% model to our knowledge.
Let me ask, Mr. Shaner, what's our special ed cost annually for all the school districts, roughly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know that up top of my head. Maybe Mr. Wilmarth might know what the reimbursement is. Just the total sped reimbursement per year.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's around 260 million.
260 million. If the possible billing to Medicaid was 13 million, you're talking about 5% then of the special ed cost could be covered. So I suppose you could say we could try saying we're only going to reimburse 95%. You guys go get the other 5% from Medicaid. I don't know whether they would respond to that or not.
Somewhere there's maintenance stuff. Maybe on a similar note, but maybe different way, instead of a carrot and stick approach that we've tried and we've offered. What if the state required it? What if we as a committee run a bill that says, hey, look, if you want 100% reimbursement, in order to get the state funds, you have to submit the federal funds for reimbursement, get your staff up and running. I mean, that's a pretty heavy duty approach. I'm not going to lie, but it's an opportunity that we could do if we are that serious about going down this road.
I think it knows. It just knows. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we need to hit anyone with a stick. I think we could probably just put in statute the 6 largest districts are, going to bill Medicaid, just instead of making it optional, and then they will. We don't have to threaten them with anything. They'll do it. And then we can see how that works and start building over time. It'll give us an opportunity to work with the districts to go beyond the little pilot that we have now with Converse. That's about 50%. 6 largest districts are about 50% of the state. So we can get the bugs worked out and then maybe scale down to those districts with over 1,000 people. That gets most of the districts at that point. And so there's no reason that we have to withhold or extort or threaten. If it's time to move to this policy, then we just put it in statute that we're going to bill Medicaid and that each district shall develop a program for Medicaid billing in these categories, and they'll just do it. I don't think we have to worry too much about threats and coercion and heavy sticks. We do this all the time. It's just a change of policy. So that would be my recommendation, and when it's appropriate time, I'll move to draft a bill.
Just a bit of clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Rothfuss, is the bill you're proposing, as you first stated, for the larger districts? I mean, the issue for the smaller districts is real, and they don't have the ability to do this in many cases. So I just want to make sure I understood what your proposal was.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we would start with districts with enrollments over 3,000 students. That's the 6 largest districts. We'll learn a lot. They'll be able to do it. They have the administrative capacity to do it, and they can bill, and they're experienced with billing through special education for additional staff that they would need. So that's not going to cause any problems. That's going to work. We'll learn a lot from that. And then at some point in the future, we can say, all right, we've got this system working pretty well. Maybe we've optimized it and made it as easy as possible. We've got the unified software in place that Representative Berger's talking about. You know, you fix the problem, smooth it out with the larger districts that are capable of doing it. Then we drop down to those districts with over 1,000 students. And then at some point, some future legislature, maybe long after we're gone, has all districts do it. But that's going to be a de minimis return for significantly more work. And I don't know why we would necessarily need to have that happen unless we just wanted to count every penny.
Okay, let's, committee, I think we're headed for something. Let's hold on this. Are there any other unrelated questions? We'll come back to this after the public comment period. Okay, thank you all very much. You can see the problems that we're having.
So we
Okay,
need to move to the.
yeah,
Michelle Brandt bar.
okay, we do have a request to deal with the governor's office, deal with the presentation on the BAR, our program. Let's do that now, then we'll go to the public comment, and we'll do that before lunch. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could, Dickie Shaner, Department of Ed, our team is prepared to present as well now too. They're done with the mental health task force, so. whenever-
Okay. But we're going to hear about this other one first because they do have an obligation. Okay, go ahead, proceed.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Lachelle Brandt, Deputy Policy Director in Governor Gordon's office. Thank you for this opportunity to be on your agenda today. And I think Senator Rothfuss and Representative Northrup set the stage for this conversation and the why we're before you today. If you recall, the RIDE committee, as Senator Rothfuss suggested, made a strong recommendation that we increase capacity in schools to address student behavior and student well-being in the state. And I know this committee is going to receive the recommendations that Chairman Northrup described from the Mental Health Vulnerable Task Force. And knowing that this has been some of the discussion, I felt that you would all benefit from hearing from the experts of this model and the successes it's had over the past 20 years and the data, the strong data that supports it. I've had the opportunity over the last year to learn about it as well, and had the chance to talk to state leaders as well as former principals, superintendents, and students, and how it's transformed their lives and changed the rates of absenteeism, suicide, teacher retention, many of the challenges that Wyoming faces that are related to student well-being, but also increased student engagement and academic success as well. So it really fits into, I think, what we're trying to achieve with mental health, but the differences that you might hear today is that the model is for 3 years. It's not long-term. It is intended to come into the schools, not add additional staff, work with staff within the schools to train them, and then BAR leaves and this model stands on its own. So with that, I would just like to introduce you to Angela Jarabek. She is the founder and director of BAR. Ms. Jarabek began her career in education as a licensed K-12 teacher and spent 2 decades as a school counselor in a suburban high school in Twin Cities, Minnesota. During that time, she developed the BAR model, an evidence system that improves student, teacher, and school level outcomes. Since its inception, BAR has expanded from 1 school in the Midwest to more than 350 schools across the U.S., serving over 350,000 students. BAR is the first school improvement intervention to successfully climb the 3 tiers of evidence required under the U.S. Department of Education's Investing in Innovation I3 program. Ms. Jarabek has published 5 books and numerous op-eds and articles. She has received several accolades, including the Donald McNeely Center Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award and the Thomas B. Fordham Institute's National Wisest Wonk recognition. In 2020, she was helped develop the national guidelines for integrated student support that address both in and out of school barriers and learning, including mental health. And in 2024, she received the James Bryant Conant Award from the Education Commission of the States. Also, we are fortunate to have Rob Metz here today with us. He is the Deputy Director of the BAR Center. He has 36 years of experience in Minnesota public schools. He's served as a superintendent, high school principal, elementary teacher, and high school coach. He retired as the superintendent of schools in the school where the original BAR was started. And as a high school principal, he saw firsthand how the BAR model can accelerate learning and create a safe, strength-based learning environment. Since 2018, he has helped scale the BAR model to 350 schools nationwide, achieving consistent positive results regardless of school size, type, and location. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Jarabek to begin their presentation.
Okay, see.
Here. First of all, thank you so much, Chairman, for having us here. I'm also very aware of time and a teacher. So all those many slides, we're going to go fast and we're going to really leave it to questions so that way you can ask us the questions that you have. So as referenced, I was a high school counselor and you're going to hear about this. This is a school-based model that has been heavily researched. So often school models are developed in universities and brought to schools. This was a model that was developed in the schools and then tested by universities. Mr. Metz.
Greetings, Chairman Scott and committee members. My name is Rob Metz. As was mentioned, I was the principal of the first BAR school in America. I grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota and ended up with a long career as a teacher, principal, and superintendent. Really happy to be here with you today. Our second slide, please. BAR is a K-12 coaching and training program. We work with schools and they get many good outcomes from working with us, including higher reading and math scores, improved attendance, increased teacher satisfaction, reductions in risky behavior, and a decrease in disciplinary incidences. The name BAR stands for Building Assets, Reducing Risks. Think of assets are the good things that young people need to grow and develop. BAR intentionally builds assets in young people. The more assets you have, the fewer risky behaviors you participate in. So BAR is a prevention model of school support.
So the origination of BAR. Next slide, please. My son, who now is 25, at the time was 6 months, and my daughter was 4 years old, and they really helped inspire BAR. So I went 5 years of being the high school counselor at my district, and half of the kids failed a class. I went to my principal to resign, to say, clearly, I am not getting this job done with half of the kids failing a class. And he said, it's not you, it's not our school, that's actually the national average. About half the 9th graders fail a course. It's endemic. And he said, I encourage you to come up with a better way. So I'm sitting at home with my children, and my 4-year-old daughter proceeds to grab a handful of crayons and attempts to take a bite out of them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not good at my job. I'm not good at parenting. My kid's eating crayons. So kind of during these moments, I called my grandma. My grandma was my go-to. And she did not miss a beat. She immediately launched in the fact, she said, I just brought Haley to Sunday school, and she went right over a girl who was so shy. And I had her over at the park, and she was so brave on the monkey bars. And oh, yep, she's a smart little cookie. And I had two realizations in that conversation. First was, I was a better parent when I had information about my child when I wasn't there. And the second is, my grandma was looking at what actually was working, and I was looking at everything that wasn't. I realized I had the same issue at school. Each teacher had their information for 43 minutes that they had that student. So even though that Rob wasn't doing well in math class, they didn't know that Rob was really good at English, let alone he was really active in community gardens and the stuff I knew as a school counselor. I realized the issue that we were having with schools failing was not about the students, and it certainly wasn't about the teachers. It was a system and then what we're trying to operate. So that then launched the beginning of VAR. So it's predicated on, next slide, please. Next, it's really predicated on the belief that our students can do this work, high expectations. We believe really strongly in high expectations because we know the students can do this. We also believe the teachers that are there know their community best and they know their students best. All schools inherited a factory model. Henry Ford developed the system for cars, as did schools. We've made a lot more revisions to the manufacturing system than we have to schools. And what BAR is really coming in to say, how do we operate differently? Recognizing that the issues that we're having is not representative of our students or of our adults. So like we need to reprioritize the school on two pillars. Next slide. One was on data. We need real-time data. So I need not data from last year. I need to know what's happening right now. And I need to know what's happening in all subject areas, not just the class that I'm teaching. So how do we open up those grade books so the English teacher can see what's happening all across the board, as well as qualitative data? What is the student doing on the athletic fields? What's happening at recess? What's happening in the community? How does that factor into what the grades are showing? Concurrent with relationships. We've got to focus on relationships from staff to student, from student to student, but then also staff to staff. Because if we're going to have a conversation about real-time data, we can't be kind of leading with, well, my department has high expectations. That's why the failure rate is there. So we need to have really clear staff to staff relationships to have honest conversations. Next slide, please. So BAR's history. After 10 years of implementing this at our school, and in the first year, our failure rate dropped in half. Over the next decade, it continued to drop at the same time that we were named the ACT College and Career Going Model of the Year, because we're identifying so many kids that are talented that this is also accelerating students. So it's just not remediation. It is how do we have every student really thrive? Our initial funding source was actually from SAMHSA. So what we were able to demonstrate is a reduction in cigarette use, a reduction in drinking, a reduction in suicide ideation, and suicide attempts. So all of our initial data was really showing risk reduction concurrent with having our students do better. So after the first 10 years, we then thought, this should work at any school. I'm not touching curriculum, not touching the bell schedule. I'm not changing anything the school is currently doing. I'm changing how we operate. I'm centering everyone around relationships and data. So that then became, how do we actually research this? Because I, as an educator, have been given a whole lot of programs that were not evidence-based. So I was never going to tell an educator to do this unless we had tested it. So that then became our, how do we start testing this work? And it's been our 25 years past, and our footprint has almost been all research. Next slide, please. So our footprint brought us all across the country. We really went to any place that people said this wouldn't work. So we went to Appalachia. We went to Baltimore, Boston. We went to big bureaucratic districts. We went to charters. We went to publics. And every single school, as you'll see, is continuing to have outcomes because, in fact, our students and our teachers are incredibly talented, and we have to be able to open up that conversation for the students to be able to be identified, as well as to be able to get those resources to those teachers. So very briefly, next slide, we have more evidence than any other model in the country right now. So we have 20 years of research, and we have 20 statistically significant outcomes for both students as well as teachers. So someone had referenced the Hunt Institute. They've had BAR present a couple times around teacher retention. So teachers are more effective. They're more satisfied. They're working with their colleagues in this model. At the same time, math and reading scores are going up, and these are the same students using the same curriculum, but we're able to see the whole student. And we are able to continue to show these changes within 1 year. All of our research were randomized control trials, rarely if ever done in education. Next slide. So I'll hit the last couple data slides and then Mr. Metz can talk, but we met the evidence for ESSA requirements for strong evidence for both reading and for math. And this once again was shown within 1 year, and this by once again opening up these communications. Next slide. The other big pieces that we're able to demonstrate is the ability to impact chronically absenteeism, suspensions, as well as persistence. Students and teachers are happier coming to a place where they're able to be in relationship with each other. Next slide, and I'll give this to Mr. Metz.
As mentioned earlier, BAR stands for Building Assets, Reducing Risks. And you can see that in BAR schools, assets go up. Specifically, students feel more supported, they become more engaged, and they know more is expected of them. When that happens, risky behaviors go down. Chronic absenteeism goes down, discipline incidences go down, substance use goes down, and suicide ideation and attempts go down. They work like a teeter-totter. As the assets go up, the risks go down. Next slide, please. Teachers benefit greatly from BAR. So these are the results from our randomized control trials where literally the teachers were randomized. Half of them in a school did BAR, half did not do BAR, and then their outcomes were compared. And you can see in BAR schools, teachers benefit over non-BAR teachers in almost every way. In fact, the researchers who did the research on BAR said that if our scale-up study had focused on teacher retention, BAR would have shown the greatest impact on teacher retention of any educational initiative they studied. So teachers benefit greatly from BAR. Next slide, please. The Hechinger report did a big study on all of the initiatives that were funded by the U.S. Department of Education in the same way that BAR was funded, the randomized control trials that we've been talking about. They found that only about a fourth of them showed positive outcomes and no harm to students. They listed BAR as the poster child of success. So of all the, more than $1 billion that was spent on these initiatives, about a quarter worked, and BAR worked the best of any of them. Next slide, please. AIR did the evaluation on BAR, and they put together this mediation analysis, which really shows how BAR works. So on the right-hand side of this chart, you can see the academic outcomes. Every school is trying to improve academic outcomes for their students. In almost every case, they work on the right-hand side of this chart. So if they want higher math scores, they change something in math. That's what we're used to doing for all these years. BAR does it just the opposite. We coach the adults at the school to implement the BAR system. The first thing that happens is teacher attitudes change. You can see along the bottom of this graph are all the outcomes that Angie pointed to earlier. The teachers believe they can do better. They believe their school can be more effective. They believe their administrator is more effective. Then their behaviors change. They learn how to build positive, intentional relationships with students. They collaborate in a much greater and deeper way with one another. The students then feel that. They feel more supported. They feel more is expected of them. They become more engaged. No surprise, engaged students attend school more, get in trouble less, and demonstrate better social skills. And then the academic outcomes are just a byproduct of a left to right system. One of our outcomes was our reading and math scores go up in all of our schools in 1 year. And we don't change a thing in reading and math. And the schools sometimes come and say to us, how did our math scores go up? We didn't change anything in math. Well, if you really think about it, listening to some of the conversation earlier this morning, if students are engaged, they're going to do better in math. How do they become more engaged? By having a positive relationship with other students and adults at the school. How does that happen? You change the way the school operates. You use a different system. Next slide, please. This is just a graphic way to show how this works. So when a school implements BAR, they can implement it in any grade that they wish. They can implement it in an entire elementary school, in one grade, in an entire high school, in just one grade, and same with middle school. But every student that's part of BAR is discussed regularly. They all participate in relationship building activities that the teachers use, and we intentionally build relationships with young people in a much deeper and better way. Then those teachers meet. We create interdisciplinary teams where they meet and they discuss every student. The students with lesser needs are discussed at one level of meeting, and the students with greater needs are discussed at a different level of meeting, which we call Community Connect. That's where the community and the school and the family come together. I'll give you a very quick example. So in one of our schools, there was a young lady who was very high achieving. She had A's in all of her classes. She was captain of all the sports teams, but she was coming to her teachers and asking for extra credit and for more work. As the teachers met in their team and it was her time to be discussed, one of the teachers said, I have a concern about this young lady. Like, she is so over intense. It doesn't make sense. Another teacher on that team said, I have a concern too. I mean, she's losing weight. She doesn't look right. She doesn't look happy. Like, something's not right. They were able to move it up the chain to Community Connect, and the school did an outreach to the family. The family took the child to the doctor, and she was diagnosed with an anorexic condition very quickly. That whole process, from a small meeting to a Community Connect meeting to an intervention by a family, could happen in 2 days. And the nice thing about the way this BAR system works is every student is discussed and their information is shared by all and goes up and down the system very, very quickly. Next slide, please. Just a few quick success stories. During these team meetings, where teachers are discussing students and creating strategies for them, some of our schools take time and celebrate every single student as they discuss them. This school decided to send happy cards home to every single student after they discuss them. This is next slide, please. This is a school in Minnesota, Detroit Lakes High School. It's on the edge of the White Earth Reservation. They've had significant issues over the years. They are now in their 3rd year of BAR. Their outcomes are absolutely unbelievable. Chronic absenteeism, which was a huge issue, has dropped by 2/3. Failure rates have dropped by more than 2/3. I could go on and on about this school, but they have made a significant difference. And this slide just shows the Indigenous students in their school who, for the first time in years, had a homecoming float. And the principal contributes it to BAR, that the relationships are so much better in the school that the students felt comfortable doing this. They had such success that another Native school in South Dakota, Crazy Horse High School, decided to visit Detroit Lakes to see what they were doing. And now they are implementing BAR. They're in their 1st year, and it's been really great working with them. Because one of our outcomes is a pretty dramatic reduction in chronic absenteeism, we have put on several webinars for the nation, having our school leaders that are in BAR schools share about their drop in chronic absenteeism and explaining how BAR has helped them to do that. So these leaders along the bottom are from a variety of different states. Amazing drops in chronic absenteeism. Josh Omong, who you see there, is the principal at Detroit Lakes High School that I just referenced. Noel Crum in Kentucky had a large chronic absenteeism issue, and it dropped from 20% to below 5%. Next slide, please.
These are the closing. So I guess kind of have a visual of what BAR really is focuses is going upstream. So we discuss every student at least twice a month. So the straight A students who, once again, may be looking fine on paper, we can't really see what they're struggling with. as well as being able to address the students who are struggling and get them resources quickly. So when you're bringing in these outside resources, getting a warm handoff and having the teacher know that the things that I'm looking at, someone's addressing those. So it's really trying to get very far upstream to have a healthy system for both the teachers and the adults. Because I do have to say, the toll that it's taking on our teachers with the number of students who are struggling is really hard when they don't have a place to bring that information. So this is also providing them the supports of being able to say, I see something, I'm a little bit worried, and having a place to bring that. And then the final slide is in particular talking about our ability to really assist with this students who are kind of at the most risk, the suicide ideation, the suicide attempts, because it is right now young people are really struggling in ways that we haven't seen in the past, and having multiple eyes on them and communication with the family to really be able to identify that early and get them the supports. The story that Rob had referenced, that student actually went off to Yale and then Harvard Law School, and she's a very successful attorney. It was identified early that she was struggling with anorexia and working with that family to get her right back on track to be able to have her succeed. But with that, we'll just open it up to questions. But really thank you for letting us share our work.
Representative Prevents.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I probably have plenty of questions. I guess I'll just kind of start with this essentially professional development training. What is the actual like methodology, like program? You know, I see your results and I looked up some of your academic papers on Google Scholar, but I'm trying to understand exactly what is it that we're implementing in as a program. And then beyond that, what does that cost per school? Or are we teaching individual teachers? Are we going in and doing systemic changes within the school? I just kind of would like some of the like logistical, what is the program that results in outcomes?
Yes. Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
It's professional development and coaching. So if a school says, I'd like to do BAR because we had so much research and we were able to have AIR accompany us, we know it takes about 3 years of coaching and training to get the differences, to make those changes. We have outcomes in 1 year, and after 3 years, the school is able to self-sustain. So if a school said we want to do this, they would get 2 people sent to their school to train as many or the entire staff as they like. So we really want this to be a shared understanding of kind of what this is. And then they get a dedicated coach. And the coach will be calling that school at least weekly, will be coming out 4 times a year. And we're wanting the school to have enough supports to do it, but not be dependent on an external person. So they continue to have a coaching, they can call that coach every day. At minimum, they'll have weekly contacts. And then they'll be coming out when we have rubrics to be able to say, how is this working? Is it strength-based? Are you getting the data you need? Is everyone engaged? So it's professional development and coaching, and it's a shared kind of piece.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the vote of confidence there. Thank you, guys. Great program, by the way. Quick question, in a district that uses the high reliability schools and are being certified in those high reliability sessions, and they're doing the PLC work, professional learning community work. Well, in our district, we've worked really hard to change our schedule to have common planning time among not only curriculum, but also grade level planning time so that they can talk about those. I'm seeing similar connections. How do you work with those schools? Have you worked with those schools who are high reliability? Marzano's work, obviously. How have you worked with those schools? Because I see this similar to high reliability certification level 1. So could you speak to that a little bit for me?
Mr. Chair? So first of all, when we go to the school, we're like, what do you currently have going on? Because we don't want to disrupt anything that is currently working. So yes, we have worked with those districts. And then we once again come in. So like the PLCs, we're able to utilize those. We're bringing the data forward. So we're bringing the best practices that we have of both to get this to be sustainable and systematized. So we work closely with the systems that are currently in place. I think I had referenced, like in West Virginia, they have communities in schools they're also working with. So we never want to disrupt what is happening. But what we've been able to show is our evidence has shown that all of the schools are continuing to make gains. So it is both a both and, that we are going to make sure that we are respecting the community, and we're going to say these things have been effective. Rob?
Mr. Chair, committee members, I just want to add one piece in that what will look different. I'll use a high school example. It applies in elementary and middle school in very similar ways. So if we were 3 high school teachers, English, science, and social studies, historically, I would only meet with the social studies teachers. And when I did, we would talk about curriculum or standards or something like that. In a bar school, we're meeting in interdisciplinary teams, and we're talking about human beings. We have a group of students that we're tracking very carefully. We're building relationships with them intentionally, and we're creating strategies for them when they are necessary. So this is a different concept. It's a different way of working because we're working across departments on teams that are focused on humans, the students, learning as much as we can about them and then creating strategies and following their successes. So in most cases, teachers have never done this before. And our coaching is required to cause them to do this in a very positive way. It's very strength-based because we never talk about a student until we name their strength, their spark, what they're really interested in, who's got the best connections with them at the school. Where are the relationships the strongest? Then we'll look at what the issue is, we'll set a goal, we'll create a strategy, and we'll follow that student until that strategy is met. So it is a different way of operating a school. When we talk about the students with less needs, it's just the 3 of us. But when we get to the next level, the counselor, the social worker are there. No surprise, Angie was a counselor that created this, because now instead of just her knowing all the information, this whole team knows it. And they're getting it from the Community Connect meeting. They know what's happening at home and in the community with the student. And the community's learning and the family's learning what's happening at school. So it's a very ingenious system that uses the exact same teachers in just a different way.
Okay. Let me try to direct this a bit. Governor's office. What we're really talking about here is a way of managing a school district system for doing it. Is there any legal reason that a school district can't decide to adopt this? Because if it's going to work, it's got to be something the school district wants to do. In other words, is there anything you need out of the legislature in order for school districts to go ahead and adopt this if they want to?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. I will note that I believe you'll hear from the Department of Education, perhaps after lunch maybe, but we do have school districts who have opted into a grant program that has been offered to them, I believe, through ESSER. And we do have school districts that will be piloting this next year. So it will give us firsthand opportunity to see some of the success of this. But beyond that, there is a cost for the 3 years that would need to be either a grant or some type of appropriation from the state. There's nothing legally stopping them, but it would be an investment that they would have to find the funds for those 3 years.
So after we've had some experience, then the question is that something we ought to routinely fund for everybody?
Yes, and that's why I'm bringing it to you at the time of you're thinking about recalibration and having these policy discussions. Is just, does this fit for you in those policies that you're thinking about developing?
We can do the steps that you think are necessary next with the grant funding, and then the question becomes a funding issue going forward.
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
that's correct.
That clarifies things.
Chairman,
Yes.
the training is during professional development time, I'm assuming, and districts in there worked in there, or if it's after hours, is it paid for? I mean, let's say we have to go from 3 to 5, and things like that. And then my other meeting with, we do very good job with our PLC, our professional learning communities. And it worked very hard to get those common planning times. In the high school, it's very difficult to get those other 3 together. My question now is to get those, the English and the history and the science teacher and the, I'll keep, you know, even the career tech teachers all together. Their time would probably be after school. I see that. That's what I see to talk. In the PLCs, we still talk, our biggest thing now is, you know, common formative assessments, all that. Okay, now we're really getting engaged as the work has gone on for the last 5 years. We're getting engaged in the nitty gritty, talking about the kids now. We're starting to see that trend in our district, getting down to what this kid needs, because we're demanding a lot from these kids. So I see you guys more of supporting us in our CEL program and working with that program. It definitely fit with high reliability schools. And I do see it as an add to benefit with very good professional development. That's what I'm thinking right now. Am I correct? So lots of stuff there, but where do you deal with those, especially money and time for teachers? I see a lot of teachers doing out of time work.
Brief response to that.
We work with the school. We do train, I mean, the two trainers are going to come to you when your school says, I'm ready. So we do it in the middle of the year. We do it whenever the school says they're ready. In terms of compensation, we defer to local context. I'll say we've effectively worked with the California Union, which is not an easy organization. And they also say this is having teacher retention. Their teachers are staying, their teachers are happier, their teachers are satisfied and effective. So I will say the leaders are finding ways to have it work, but believe strongly in making sure that teachers' time is compensated for. So we would say, here's the services, we come to you, you let us know when it works.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're going to go back. We're going to, before we go to lunch, we're going to hear from the WEA and the Park County School District. Is it one?
It's always one.
Come forward now and tell us, we got delayed because these people had other obligations. We want to hear from you.
Mr. Chairman, with respect, I believe that the WDE is going to present on Project Aware. It may be helpful to wait until after they present to tell you what it looks like in districts. So if with respect,
Hold off.
I think I'll hold off until after the WDE does their presentation, if that's okay.
So you'll be available after lunch.
I'll be here all day.
Mr. Chairman, I'm fine to provide comment now if that's all right with the committee. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I'd like to raise a few points, some good discussion here today. I really appreciate the committee's work on this. This is a significant issue in our schools. It's a significant issue with our students and our teachers. And I think keeping in mind that this problem of mental health in our schools, we need to view it holistically. We are not going to find a silver bullet answer to this, but instead we need to be aware of the totality of that problem and understanding that where the appropriate and effective relief is. Some of that can be legislative. I've got a couple of ideas and suggestions I'd like to present. Some of that is going to be within department or agencies. So Department of Ed, State Board of Education, and then some of those are going to be very grassroots. So last interim, we did bring with us the Wyoming School Counselors Association as well as the Wyoming School Psychologists Association. I'm happy to reach out to them again and see if we can bring them back to future meetings or just even some additional counselors and psychologists. But from my recollection in what they were seeing and what some of the issues were, what they are seeing is very it resembles what our teachers are seeing, right? Because of our funding issues and because of our shortages with our teachers, districts and schools and staff are doing shuffling. So a lot of those counselors end up doing testing, scheduling. So they don't spend the time, to Senator Rothfuss's point, they don't spend the time doing the work that they were hired to do in terms of addressing the mental health needs of our students, and instead are also filling these other gaps. The other issue you have is that uh, in terms of that attraction and retention piece, right? Again, this is part and parcel of our larger school funding conversation, but you have market externalities. So if you think about a licensed counselor, what the private market is paying for a private counselor, schools can't attract those licensed counselors because they just can't match that pay. They also have the ability to manage their caseload. In a lot of districts, what we heard from school counselors and psychologists, and it's not all of them. I mean, I think Jay can speak to their program up there. They're right along the association's recommendations. But in a lot of our districts, they are well and above their school counselors and school psychologists associations recommendations for caseloads. I think one of the things that we also need to keep in mind is recognizing that the students that we are talking about today are not the students that we were when we went to school. You know, I think about my son and looking at his school experience and his life experience. The students of today, they're different in their aspirations, they're different in their worldviews, and they're different with the troubles that they find. These, truthfully, are a massive problem for our teachers. When I'm talking to teachers, this is the #1 issue that keeps coming up. These things in terms of their mental health, being able to keep their students engaged. You know, we heard how important that student engagement is. These are problematic. You have potentially a legislative remedy for you all to kick around. In Indiana, they just passed Senate Bill 185. The language in there allows for exceptions in terms of use of technology for learning, family emergencies, students on IEPs. Very well thought out bill that mandates that districts prohibit cell phone use within instruction time, that they develop those policies. This is just something that you have as an option to you that I wanted to present to you because we have seen other states pass bills similar to this. We have also seen other states exploring this. This is just one of those little pieces you might be able to address in terms of what happens in our classroom, student mental health, as well as engagement. I think the other piece here that the grassroots piece, and this is where the remedy within State Board of Education or, you know, the examination of standards are discussions about testing. This is why WA is really encouraged by the work of RIDE. This work, I think one of the other things recognizing that our students of today are different than we were is that what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from students who have engaged in that RIDE program is that it engages them. It goes to them. It talks to them, right? It meets them where they want to be, their aspirations, the things they want to learn about. So I'm very encouraged. I think that's a grassroots piece that works in coordination with discussions around standards and testing. But I think in terms of legislative remedies, we should probably examine some of the funding pieces. We did have consultant recommendations for what we need to look at in terms of counselors. You can look at the idea of the cell phone bill, but I think those are a couple of legislative remedies that you do have before you. I'm excited. I like hearing about the BAR program. I do have questions, right? It's again, if it's professional development, are we adding this in to what we already have as professional development? To Representative Berger's point, is this, you know, when are we doing this within contract hours, or is this additional work outside of contract hours that our teachers are already going well and above? So some questions with that, what that looks like, but excited to hear what else is in store. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that Indiana Senate bill that just passed and other legislation that you said states have been considering, I'm wondering if there's been challenges on First Amendment or any other issues of that nature. Just because I think, you know, I'm in alignment. I mean, quite frankly, I would love to ban social media altogether. I'm a radical. But I do think, you know, how I'm hearing those concerns and I'm just wondering if there's potential, if there's litigation involved in those states that are trying to take legislative action. So I think our school districts would probably be on board if we found a way to move forward with that, but I'd be curious legally what we're looking at.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, not that I'm aware of. That bill just passed. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be, but I am not aware of any current litigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Mullen, do you know, are you aware of any litigation that's happening from school districts? Maybe not, I don't think in Wyoming yet, but suing social media companies for kind of how they're targeting and impacting students. Is that something that you are aware of? And if so, is there a way that maybe the state can help implement litigation against social media companies for coming after our children? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, not that I can speak to in detail, but worth exploring.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, we need to break for lunch. We're at 12. Can we be back at 1:30? 1:40, I think you probably said. Okay, adjourn till 1:40.